Does username have to be camel case or no?
No, we didn't do that. I don't believe we did that in our object,
No,
did
we did not.
I don't think so. Yeah, no. I believe if this was camel case, you would have to. Understanding, yeah, the keys in the field must match. We got that one. Just do best password. Send that in. And, oh, right. Post. There's Manny. And I got an error. Oh, great.
He's 4 minutes late.
Oh, right, the roles. I need to do the insert of the roles. Okay. Now this will be good because we'll make sure we have this on video nice and early. So when you're doing this, we're going to do insert.
Hello.
Hey, Manny.
Hi, Manny. Hi, Gabe.
Oh,
Likes. 1 second. All right, all set. Okay, so insert two. Roll, I think we do. Yeah. Roll rolls. I keep forgetting on that one. Let's do this. Roll. And my Slack still going off like crazy. Oh geez, what are people doing? That was sad. Jeez. Yeah, my Slack going crazy. That's why the what? Is it this one that's going off? Oh. Sorry guys, 1 second. I just want to make sure I'm not keep getting pings from the I need to. Direct. That one would be the one that's getting me all alerted. Okay. Now there we go. Yeah, I think that was the one that was doing it. It was the other channel for the stipend stuff. Okay. Anyway. Like I'm getting the Slack pings, but yet I'm seeing nothing new in any channels. I'm like, what is going on? I was losing my mind. All right, here we go. Let's quick insert into roll. Time. I don't have it. Okay. Pull up my notes again. One thing I will remember, I want to let you guys know so you don't feel so bad about it. Remembering the actual exact syntax for things is not easy. So it's insert into, and so don't feel bad if you have to double check the syntax. And that's one of the things that you want to try to do. The thing that I will say to the developer, the key item is to memorize what you can do, not necessarily the exact code on how to do it. So knowing the basics, like knowing that the command is insert into, gives me all I need in order to find the exact syntax. And Googling, even during an interview, Googling the syntax is fine. That is safe, that is expected. Googling how to do something gets a little more risky, especially if you Google if you Google how to solve the specific question that was asked. That doesn't work. Don't do that, that looks bad. But Googling the syntax or how to do a smaller task, those are okay. Yeah, that's set. Set is for update. I think that was wrong. Into roll. Yeah. Right. Full name. Yep, name. Use. Yeah. There we go. I send this. It is happy. Good. So database is running again. Now let's go ahead and sign in. Token. Go to new tab here. Get. Authorization. Fair token. Paste and send. Got my array. So now I'm going to go ahead and create the account for this developer. So switch it to post. If I double check the code again, let's go to our developer controller. Go down to the post. There it is. We no longer accept I am no longer getting the ID for the request by anything like that. We actually shouldn't be doing that, but yeah. So yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. So we can't do this without logging in. So that's the key. So that's why I can no longer create a developer account for someone else's user account. I'm not currently checking to see if they already have one, am I? No, I'm not. So technically I could create a new developer, but I would then, am I going to disconnect? I think it'll disconnect it potentially. Ooh, actually, I don't think it will. It's not going to show me the table yet because it doesn't have anything in there. But because we did it the one directional, I think the user ID is stored in the developer row. I could theoretically have two developers pointing to the same ID. So that is something we can keep in mind, but not important. Just aware of it. So one thing you might want to add here, so we can do this little syntax to do. Check existing existing developer. Again, for the newer students, again, I don't know if this was shown before. When you add these things, this is the to-do syntax. It adds a coloration and adds it to this little list down the lower left here. And so you can click on the lower left, go to to-do, and you can see all the to-dos you have in your project. So
It's fantastic.
yeah, make sure you guys knew that. It's very useful if you need to do things, you need to remind yourself to add something later. I'm using them for personal projects a lot of times, so they are very, very key to not forget to do something. So good, glad you guys are familiar with it. Awesome. So I can add that for you guys later. But overall, this works for the demonstration purposes that we need. Let's go ahead and add my user account then. So body, JSON. User, I need a name. And this is probably something we would update later on. We don't actually include the email in the developer profile anymore because it's no longer needed. We have it in the username of the user. So, I'll still add it. And we have nothing confirming that the email here is identical to the email in the user profile. So that's another disconnect our code has right now, where it's not connected. Port 0. Stuttered it all.
There is a way of that. There is a way we can get the email from the user table to attach to this,
Of course we can.
this person, right?
Of course we can. We technically already pulled the user here, so we could just feed that into the record. We do the
Okay.
new developer set user. We could also do new developer dot set email as well.
Oh, okay.
So we totally could do it, but in this case, it makes more sense to not need it because then anytime I update the user's email, I need to make sure I also update the developer email record as well because they are two distinct entities. Updating one does not update both. So that's where we would have again, not wrong, but just inconvenient system in a less effective system because it requires more updating and actually remember to update both records so you don't have old data or artifacts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like one of the cascading or something, I know there's something you can have it so it automatically will update the records like down through the child's, but yeah, but anyways.
Yeah. Yep. No, definitely. And there we are. I can now see that I created a developer. If I then go back to just get and click the send button there, we see there's my one developer. So logging in, creating systems, creating a developer account, that all works. What I want to discuss today is, of course, adding the developer features to the geek out. But in order to do that, I want to save myself from having to type this stuff here every single time I want to get the user, right? And so I'm going to create ourselves a user service that we can then use. Make sense? So we've talked about services before. We haven't really used them much because they didn't really make sense before. But now we see that if we don't do that, every single model, or sorry, every single controller is going to have another user repository potentially, because we need to pull the user for every single authenticated route. So you need to be able to pull the user out of every single authenticated route, and that seems redundant to have to keep typing this kind of code here. So let's add a new package to our root app and just call services. So just like our models and controllers, you have models, controllers, repositories, and now we have services. Again, we did keep the security-based services separate because we want to make sure that those are identified as security-based, they're authentication-based systems, and also because we're overloading or overriding the existing services of the security system. So I do want to keep that separate. Just in case anyone was wondering if we wanted to combine or do anything special with that, we're going to keep them separate. These are the services for our specific systems. Java class. And we have our @service Spring Framework annotation. So again, what am I looking for? So again, this will let Spring Boot know, hey, to load this system as a service and be able to utilize the AutoWire system as well. So we have a user service @AutoWired. I'm going to bring in the two tools we need. So we look back at our logins. I'm going to bring that over here. Controller, where's my developer controller? Go. Over here. We use the authentication system. Let's look at the top, make sure anything here we brought in. The only thing we brought in at AutoWired was just the user repository, right? I think that was the only thing we brought in. Let's bring that in. Now what we can do here is we can actually add in logic. So what this service does and what a controller does. The controller does the logic for the route. The logic for the repository or for the entity is done in the service. And so common items you'll see here is by ID. So this you might even look at the service kind of almost like what we did before. If you remember this term pass-through method, I don't know if you remember those from like our parent-child classes. We had these pass-through methods where we would have a method of the exact same name in a container class. And so you had the class itself, and then you had a composition field, which was made of something else. And what we would do is we would allow we would have a method name that would allow us to pass through from one method, from one class to the child class or the contained class. So this is kind of what you're going to see here. A lot of these repository commands, we're just going to create a method for that repository. So now we no longer need to bring the repository into our items. We just bring in the service. And part of the reason why we do that is because a repository is much more complex than a service. A repository, as you know, we didn't actually build a repository. We built a repository interface. So that means whenever we do this AutoWired here, what happens is that we then have to build an instance of that class there. We end up building a method or a class there. And so we want to make something that's going to be a little bit easier to bring in and isn't so resource intensive. So we only bring in the repository once, and everything else just utilizes the service. So we have get by ID. In this case, we want to take a look. We want to just do a authenticate user or get authentic or get logged in user. Get current user. Well, that's very good term. Let's see. We have a couple of methods we can do. Authenticate user. Yeah, we can do get current user. Log in. Which one seems to be the best one, you think? Which one makes the most sense of what we're doing?
Get current user.
That sound good, everyone else?
That sounds good to me.
I'll say that is the common syntax, actually. So a lot of times this is what you'll see for getting the currently logged in user. 9 times out of 10 is called get current user in some form or iteration. So that is the most common because it feels exactly what we want. We want to get the current user who's using our system. So do a so apply back with a user. Oh God, did I bring the right one in? Yes, I did. Okay, make sure again, when you bring in the user, you're bringing in the one for the application and you don't accidentally bring in one from either any of these other systems. Like you don't want to bring in the Spring Framework one or the one for Apache, which is running this the server, the web server. So make sure you bring in the Geeky Likes one. And we're pretty much going to take this code here on our developer controller and just reuse it. So application, again, bring that in from the Spring Framework security core. Security context holder, so we get to bring that in again. Spring security core. Get context. Get authentication. Implementation. Our user details implementation that we configured with the authentication system. Details. To typecast it to our system. Get principal. All right. Last but not least, we're going to return. Actually, no, we got to do this first. We'll do current user. Yeah. User. No. Oh, again, I'll change it in a second. The repository. I did a capital U, didn't I? Yep, I did. That's why I was going. There we go. User details dot get ID. And again, why is this one yelling at us? What's special about the find by ID? Make sure we get the sanity check after the weekend.
Not guaranteed to get a return.
Right. So what's the data type that it returns?
Optional.
It is optional. Tell it we possibly get a user. I'm just going to try to import optional. Okay. So there's two things we can do here. Either one, we can just return the optional to our route and have the route to check to see if there's actually a valid user or not. And that way the route can also determine, it can determine that if there is no user, we can still move forward. And so we could have it do it here. At the same time, we can also extract it and either return null if it is a user, if there's no user logged in, or return user if there is. Or with a class, you can return null as a way of saying there is none of this. So we do have that option. And for me,
I say return to null.
Yeah, since this says get current user, I don't like the idea of getting an optional from it. This is either going to get me a user or send null, right? That does make, for me, that makes the most sense of what it should do. So we're going to go ahead and do a if user dot is empty. Return null. Otherwise, return user dot get. Again, the main thing to keep in mind is that we can do this with no warning, no error, because we did a check for existence. If I was to comment this out again, you'll see we get that yellow highlight warning us, hey, you're getting this, without checking to see if there's something there. Again, as long as we do some what I like to call an existence check, we get no warnings. What this is going to do is going to either return the actual user record or a null. And that's an easy item to do conditional checks for. And we don't have to add this additional logic in our routes, checking to see if it's there. In this way, we can still check for null if we need to, and then we can decide whether or not we let them in. So even on the quote public routes that still allow for so even though we can have public routes, we can have public routes that do change if there's someone logged in. And that's what I want to show with this. So you can actually have, so make sure, one thing to understand is that on our non-authenticated routes, because our filter doesn't decide to check if it is an authenticated route or not, it will still go ahead and attempt to decode a user. So even on our auth sign in, auth sign up, it will still check to see if there's someone logged in at the time. If there's it will check to see, is there a bearer token? And if there is, it's going to validate it and create that user and do all that stuff. If there isn't, our system won't kick them out if it's not. Or at least our filter doesn't. So that's the thing to keep in mind, is that our filter, we're here under security. And if I have to pull up our, where is our filter? Auth entry point, there it is, right? No, that's not it. Token filter, that thing. Here we are. Our token filter, nowhere in our code do we actually return or throw out an exception saying you're not authenticated, right? We catch here an exception and say we can't set the authentication. We don't then kick out. So we actually leave it up to the username password authentication filter to actually deny or approve someone. We leave it to this filter to decide whether or not someone should or should not be allowed in. And this filter uses these settings here to decide whether or not they should. Go for a second so you can see this better. So these fields here decide what lets this filter know should it or should it not allow the person to this route. So if we had another route that was, let's say, allowed to be public, let's say, again, this is not something I'm going to cover in the class, but the more specific, you want to get really, really specific with it. And you saw that with the test, we could open it up, but then still only allow certain people. So we could open up the developer controller. So we could open up the, and I just closed it, right? So we open up the developer controller so we can do a get all by ID. We could then add to all the other routes what we did here with the pre-authorize has role. So you could put this under, we could put this line, this annotation right here under our post route, right? We'll put this under the post route, this under the put route to say, hey, you can only create a developer or update an existing developer if you have this role because you're logged in. Whereas if you're just trying to get a list of all developers, everyone can do that. So you can get very, very specific with this, very, very particular with it, if you wish to so choose to do so. And last but not least, I'm actually not going to say that because I actually haven't tested it yet. I think you can put strings. I think you can put variables here, but I haven't actually tested it, so I'm not going to say you can or not. I should test that. That's something I want to test. I keep forgetting to do that because I hate the idea of having to type out every single role that you have that should be allowed. Do you believe you could string build this? I haven't actually tested it yet. It's one of the things I believe you can do, but I haven't actually tested on my side. So let's go ahead. All right, so
Just a question.
go for it.
If you're talking about null, returning null back. So when that returns null back,
Yes.
that should have to return null coming back. Where does it get caught to throw? Right here at this bad request?
If we choose to, yes,
You're-
we catch it. We'd have to do it
you're
here.
highlighting right now?
Yep. Yeah, we are going to update this to actually use our service now. So
Okay. And the other question would be, just if I was trying to hack the system, and I mean, I kind of slightly know this answer, but I'm just in case if I was trying to hack the system with the bearer token, and I just generate my own bearer token, and the bearer token had the word null in it, and I tried to pass it through, would it as like a first name or like a username? Would it really toss the system because it's considered because null is considered a system type thing when it passes through the code?
yes and no, no, because it will fail on the gets. So the second we try to run a get on a nulled item, it's going to throw an error, an exception. So that's something you need to check for. And that's why, again, it's very important that if something can be null, you do check for nullification.
Hmm.
So that's one of the benefits, and that's one of the advantages of the optional. I will give optional that, is that optional has the advantage of warning you if you attempt to do a .get before checking for existence, where if you don't do that, it won't check. So this is just because I do a user, it's current user, nothing in here is going to say, oh, hey, this might come back null. So an optional is the only thing that will warn you before you try to access data. So just be aware of that there can be advantages of using the optional system. But no, it should fail somewhere along the line, because at some point along the line, we're going to try to do a get ID or a get username or get something, and that's going to fail.
Yeah, because I forcibly put the word null inside the fields. 'cause
Exactly.
Back and it's going to report that.
Yeah, right. Like right here, I feel like it's gonna, like one of these right here is going to fail it somewhere
Yeah.
along the line. It
Yeah.
won't create the system. So
That's kind of interesting though, if you actually use the word null as a username, if you just legitimately just did a sign up and just did that.
that's something you should always test on things. Test sending null to your system, and how does your system handle those things? Like I said before, test sending bad data. That can be one of the best ways to check on how much more you can do to your site to improve on it, is to test it. But at the same time, like I say, don't worry about bad data when you're first building your project.
Well, either way, if you put your first name as null, it's gonna treat it as a string, not as an object
Exactly.
or as a command. So you
Yeah.
could literally name yourself null if you wanted to, and
Yep.
it'll exist,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
The question is,
True.
does your user ID exist? So that's the whole thing about the hacking situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is they're trying to guess what the user ID and the password is, and if it's all hashed out, and you don't allow SQL injection, you should be good to go. But writing null into a string column, it's not gonna damage
100%.
anything.
100% on that, David. Good catch. Yep. Good add. Yeah. No, that's again, main thing is, yeah, keep my main thing again that I want to point out though, again, when dealing with your project in the beginning, round one, assume you're working with a developer, that you're working with someone that's going to always put in the exact data that you want. You don't need to validate right from the get-go, because I don't care if you can validate that my email that I sent you is valid if your system doesn't work. I don't care that you can validate my data if your processes don't work. So always assume correct data first, so that you can make sure that the flow in your logic, the flow in your code actually does what you're intending it to do, as long as it gets the correct data. After you know that it works with correct data, you can then start adding in these systems to protect that code from getting bad data with other methods. And that's the key item there. You add that validation via other methods that you can run, so that they're separate from the system. So as you learn of new ways that bad data can come in, you can update those validators or add additional validators that can then protect your system. So always write your code as if you're working with yourself, and you know you're always going to give it good data. You're never going to give it data that is invalid.
Reminds me, I've been listening to Darknet Diaries, and I got to the one where they were talking about the secure phones and how the French police got into the network. It's amazing, just the technical breakdown necessary of understanding how to get under a system like that by understanding the process of creating data that the system would assume is legal data, is valid data. And for years they were under the radar. It's amazing just what they've developed.
Yeah, and again, that's part of, like, as much as like I always feel bad, like I always feel like I'm always pushing it. It's a nice podcast just to, again, really for me, it's to expose yourself to how you can think about problems. For me, that's one of the benefits. And that's, for me, one of the best ways to deal with like developer burnout, is to find a way to entertain myself that still exposes me to information that's going to benefit me in this field. And so one of the main reasons why I like Darknet Diaries, because it is an entertaining item, but still gives me problem solving skills and problem solutions and yeah, critical thinking skills. So even though I'm entertaining myself and I'm not actively coding, I am still benefiting from it. It's still benefiting my career.
Yeah,
So
as soon as I heard that someone left their keys like on their server, my eyes bulged out. I'm like, what? They did what? I'm thinking like I would get cold wallets for those and just give them to the right people.
You know, like that.
There you go. You know,
You'd be
yeah.
amazed what people leave behind,
Oh
trust me.
God, yes.
Yeah.
I listened
You
to
did
the one.
what?
I
Yep.
listened to the one this morning about that dude who walked in and basically robbed 3 banks. The guy he walked away with key cards, with access
Jeez.
to their system, pictures of their network closet, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
You really, as long as you know what you're doing and and you can actually talk, you could walk into a place and just say, "Yeah, I'm here to fix this," and
Yeah.
no one will question you.
True story.
Yep.
This
Depending on,
lady
yeah,
at my
depending on the
job
company,
today,
yeah.
I've been working. I'm a contractor, so I'm not even a full employee. And I said, "Hey, I need to install the VPN on your machine." She goes, "Yeah, don't worry about it." She goes, "My computer's unlocked, and if you flip the keyboard, my password's there."
Oh God.
Oh God, not the password under the keyboard.
I cried
Oh.
just a little bit, just a little bit.
Uh,
And the fact that we're going
I was already
over,
upset enough of my computer's already locked and I'm just gonna let this random person use it. But then you had to add in the computer on the passwords under the keyboard. Oh my God.
Cliff, I can't. These guys, so class 14, well, cohort 14 has seen some of the things I usually do to people who do not lock their machines.
Oh God.
They
Oh,
can tell
yeah.
you the fun
is-
I have had.
Yep. Can't approve.
At my last, granted, I did that with coworkers and not,
Right.
the customers.
Of
but
course.
I mean, if you leave your thing unlocked in front of me, people have gotten, the rule was if you don't lock your machine, you have to leave whatever happens to your machine the way that it is for a week.
Yep.
I flip
Oh, that
screens.
sounds so glorious.
I flip screens. I've put the Thunder from Down Under on their screen, like big screens. And one guy actually decided that he wanted to have some fun and try and mess with me right before I had training, and I left to California. I had his computer name, so I logged into the computer. I logged into his machine remotely from California, and added a service named Google Cleanup that would literally change his lock screen and his background to My Little Pony every time he locked his computer. So no matter how many times he changed it back, every single time he locked his computer, it changed.
Oh God,
When
that's
we're done with
glorious.
class
He did that
today,
as a
I'll
service.
post in our chat a picture of how mad he was looking at his desktop. And then when he came back, he cried so much, I made that my lock screen and I sat in front of him. So every time I'd lock my screen, it would show him what he did.
Ooh, no, as mean as that sounds, that can be a really great way to encourage good security practices in a business.
I'll post it in the Slack chat. So
Hey,
everybody
no,
can
we used to
see.
do that all the time when I was working at the bank
Yep.
on the
Damn.
second floor technical. We set this guy up. He left his screen unlocked, so we put Nyan Cat on repeat. So like when the custodians came in, they're like, "Hey, there's something wrong with this computer. It just keeps playing music all night long." Like, hey, you got to talk to that guy right there. It's his. And we changed his password so he couldn't even log back in.
Oh God. Damn.
That
Awesome.
would have been great because I would have just been annoyed. I would have just been turn my computer up and just let it annoy the whole office and just sit back and relax.
Yep, that's the
And then
beauty of
say
everybody
complain
wearing
to IT
headphones.
about it because it's not my fault.
Let's go ahead and update the system.
But my whole
so you get to see this.
my whole thing is I have the stroke of luck of always like typing in, oh, let's type a variable name or type in some type of information and always some keyword or key thing to the Java or to MySQL that always like just totally throws the program off. And I sit there and think about it and I'm like, what the hell's the problem? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, it must be this keyword because let's change this. Oh, magically it works.
All right, let's update our developer controller and use the new service we just created. You back to the code.
Let's
So,
do it.
User
do it.
service. Service. So you're still gonna use the auto wire to bring it in. So that way we don't have to do anything with the constructor. So again, by doing these things, we save ourselves from having to set up the constructor. So you auto wire our user service now instead, and we're gonna change these lines. No longer need this. We're just gonna switch this from here to which service get current user. And now we're just gonna do the simple check if current user is equal to null. We're gonna go ahead and do a response entity. We're currently returning developer, so we can do again, same thing here. We can do status null. Status. Bad request. We have to do return. There we go. Simple and straightforward, right?
What can you back up just a little bit?
Sure.
What was the first thing you did here?
We got rid of
Oh.
the user repository and we switched it to a user service.
User service. Okay.
Yep. Good.
User service. And then we just changed all this code to the method we just made.
Yep. So on the create developer, now we just do the user current user and we just check for null and then return an error. Get it.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Cool.
Oops.
All right, good. So now let's do the same thing with our geek out. We want to do the geek. Actually, let's update post mapping first. We want to do one quick thing here. So before we used to do the request body and we get a developer from it. We no longer want to accept any. We want to accept we do want to accept the developer from the body. We no longer care about the dev ID. So I no longer want to pull the dev ID from that. We actually should not be getting the ID in the request body anymore. We're going to get our ID from our authentication system now. We're still going to get a developer object of the new data that we want. We're no longer going to be pulling which developer we're updating from the body anymore. So in this case, I'm going to do user. User. First again, the if user null. I forgot my parentheses. We're asking for developer again, but this time again, we're going to do just null. We'll just return null. Again, I want to keep the same. We could, of course, update this to the response entity, but I'm just going to keep it return null for the moment. Again, this is kind of that idea that we should never get null here because we are going through the authentication. So it should already kick back. These are mostly, this check here is a sanity check for ourselves that we should be getting, that we shouldn't be hitting this, but it's there for necessity. This is something that could hint to us that we want to change this to response entity, but it's not necessary. Go ahead, Jim.
I was gonna say that this little thing this little if statement you've generated here, right?
Yeah.
Could that just be made into a method so we can just always call it instead of constantly like adding it to each
100%.
individual, like method
Yeah.
if we're going to be using it that way?
100%, especially if what you do in the if statement is the same. 100% you can add this to it. The one thing you could also look into doing is instead of doing a return of responses, you could also look into throwing responses. So throwing errors, making sure that if the service throws an error, that the route will also just continue to throw that exception out as well. So that's something you can look into as well.
I just see the repetitive as like, well, you can make that into a method.
Yeah.
If you repeat the
Definitely could.
statement.
But last thing I'm going to do here, though, is quick. Is going to do the developer now. We do need to find a developer by the ID. I think we did that already, right? We added that to our repository, didn't we? Let's check our developer repository. Yep, we did. So you have here find by user ID. So we're going to switch this from find by ID to by user ID. Switch this from dev.getID to current user.getID. All right, and that means we don't have our orals throw in that though. So because the find by user ID is not considered I thought it was an optional, wasn't it? Didn't that do it optional? Oh, we didn't do an optional. So that's why. Because it's not an optional, we don't get the orals throw. So we do want to do that. Let's test it quick. This is how you get that. I think this is what we did. Optional developer. believe if you do an optional, you can get the orals throw. Yep, there it goes. Cool. So we can throw that in. There we go. Nice. Sound good? So understand that this or else throw system is a method that is inherited by the optional class. So the optional class is what includes this or else throw. Here, I'll go with this, and I look at where optional comes from. Nice from Java util. Nice.
Yeah, if you actually look at the, go back to where you had it, if, yeah, put it on the or else throw. Just highlight the or else throw. And it'll tell you right there, jutil optional T on
Yeah.
top. Just, that's where, who owns it or who's
Yeah, so
using
even
it.
this or else throw is not even a issue with, it's not a, what's one looking for? See, no, actually, I wonder, there's a good chance we could just redo a throw new response status exception in our service. So it's very likely that actually we could just do this in our user service. I didn't write that in my notes, so I don't want to write code for you guys that I have not tested myself right now with this stuff because it's authentication. I don't want to confuse you guys too much, but it's very likely you can throw the response status exception in our user service get current user and have that work. Because that'll throw back up here to this route, which then this, as we can see, can throw as well. So because our post mapping gets constructed a certain way and they can throw this, I believe our service can throw it as well. But like I said, I didn't actually run that. So I'm not going to test. If you guys want to test it, feel free and let your classmates know. But that's it for this. It's all we have to do to update this path right here. To update this path, and we just tell it to ignore the dev ID that's included in the body. So even if someone is still using the old version of our API where they were sending the ID number with it in order to update it, we're no longer pulling it anymore out of this object. We're getting the ID from the authentication token. So we're only ever updating their developer profile. That's the key item that we're getting here. So I can, no matter what, even if Manny had a profile on my system, there's no way for me to logged in as myself to update Manny's profile in any way. Because I'm not, even if I somehow figured out Manny's ID number and I sent it in, I'm not, our backend system is not pulling that anymore. It doesn't care, it ignores that field and is only getting the developer record by the dev ID of the current user. So
does line 82 become an empty you can take out the request body and developer dev?
no, we still use this object to update the developer record.
Oh,
right
okay,
here, right.
all right, okay.
This is still our update, our updates. So you could change this from dev to updates now. So if we
Okay.
wanted to, that would probably be a better variable name. So
Choo-choo.
dang it. To do refactor dev to updates. So that's something you guys can add in as well. These are small little tweaks you can make that, again, not important enough to spend time in the class doing it, but things you can do on your own to improve this project. And again, any project I work on, I definitely want to make sure there's room for you guys to take it and go beyond with once we're done actually working on it. So that's something you can do. So that way this one makes more sense. And you can also do that in your expressing an app if you didn't do it before. We look down, let's go ahead and update the put mapping actually as well. Let's do all of these, make sure we update all of these. So in this one, we do, let's see, put mapping languages. Let's take a look at here. So we got specified developer updates. So there, let's look at the developer object. And again, we can still use that. We can still use the developer's object in order to accept the languages we want to add. We could also now switch this though to a list of languages and get them by ID number or by name. So that's something we can also do as well. I feel like this is not using the language repository. Is it? I think it is. Oh yeah, we did, because we gave it the ID numbers, right? We're expecting it to just send back the ID numbers of the languages. So we could change this now to take a list of languages now, instead of a developer object that has a list of languages, because we no longer need to pull the dev ID. Yeah, let's actually change that. That actually sounds like a good idea to actually do this, because this one, we shouldn't have to accept a developer object in order to add languages to the developer. Now we get the authentication, because the only reason we need the developer object was to do the get ID, right? Since we no longer need the ID, we no longer need the developer object. We can just accept a list of languages, and those can literally just be the language ID numbers. Yeah, sound good, right? That's like, ooh, wait, I can't do that. And we can totally do that. So let's switch our object that we're going to, the request body, from a developer of updates to a list of languages updates. Here, to get our developer again, we're going to switch from find by ID to find by user ID. We're also going to do these lines here up top. I'm going to grab our lines here, paste those in. User.getID. So now that's happy. And now we can just switch from add all updates languages to just add all updates. And because it is a list of languages, developer.language can add that list.
Huh.
So far, so good.
Mm,
Looking cool,
yeah.
right? Looking cool. Wait, which one? Let me put that in. Hold on. Post mapping. Okay, this is adding the, yeah, this is the original. Oh, this is adding the photo, right? Okay, so this is actually just adding the photo. This wasn't updating the whole record, the whole developer ID. That's what this one's doing. All right, this is the update. I really should push it. I probably should move this down, but it's fine. So that was adding the avatar. Let's go ahead and, you know what, let's do a 10. Let's do a, before we say 5 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna give you guys 5 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna put a 5-minute timer up, and we'll see, maybe even 10-minute timer. I want you guys to try yourself to update this mapping right here to no longer accept the ID number here. So we're gonna do this. I'm switching it to here, meaning that in my item here, we no longer have a path variable of long ID. So delete that. And then from here, update this this route to use our logged in user. See if you can figure it out. I will then do it myself. And then you want to compare what you wrote versus what I write and see how close you are. Sound good?
Mhm.
All right. Grab a drink. My drink is empty. Go ahead and add a timer to this. So like that. This. God dang it. There. Timer is up.
Hi. Today. Mm.
1 minute warning. All right, that's 5 minutes. Anybody need any more time? Want a little more time, or you think you got it? All right. It's okay. Kill that. Make that bigger. And yeah, all we need to do here is bring in our little code here. Hopefully we do that. That should be the easy one. I'm just gonna switch again, repository find by ID to find by user ID and give it user.getID. That is it.
Do we still
anybody-
need the slash on the put mapping, or can we get rid of the parentheses on line 17, 117 altogether?
17? Oh yeah, I don't know why we have that actually. I think that was there for just clarification of what that maps to when you don't have the route, but I'm not sure why that was there because we didn't have it on the other ones. Yeah.
Because we
Not
just
needed.
deleted the ID.
Yeah,
What's
that
that?
used to have the path variable, but you just pulled that out, but you left
Yeah.
the slash in there, so I was confused about that.
Oh, right, that's what I did. Okay, yep. Yeah, and that might actually not work right, so. Yeah, you're right, we didn't need that at all anymore. I did forget about that. Nice catch. I probably would have left that there. It was unnecessary. That's it. Everything else is the same, because again, our update variable, our update system is still bringing in all the changes, the new name, new email, new cohort, and any languages, they did that. But I am gonna actually clarify, you know what? We are gonna kill this, because this is an artifact from back before we had the language object. You remember, guys? This is actually from before we had the language object. And the many-to-many relationships. We're actually gonna also comment this out.
Ooh.
I doubt any of you would actually have thought of that because that wasn't necessarily clear, and I didn't really mention that one. But we did, this was from before when we used to not have the language entity. This is when our language was literally just an array of strings. So that's when we had that. We only want languages being updated via the language route. The post there. Now that does mean, just to clarify, we don't have any way of removing languages from ourselves yet. That is something you would have to add later on. And yeah, last thing here, delete mapping as well. I would change this last but not least to just being that. Paste in and do, which again, we would need to, now here is the fun thing here. So we do know that delete by ID is expecting the user ID. So actually, so the question is, can you do this in our repository system too? And the answer is, well, I don't see why. The answer is, I don't see why not. If you remember correctly, in our user repository, we didn't always have to use a find system. Let's go back to our auth, not that one. Go back to, where is it? user repository, we had these exists by username. So it's very likely we can do another thing where we just do, what does that return actually? This returns a
ID.
ID number.
ID.
Void.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's not bad. ID. No, it returns a void. Yep, I thought so. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
returns a void. Yeah, we're trying to see what this returns. Yeah, this
Oh.
returns a, there it is. I don't know why that didn't show right away.
Oh,
Void, there it is. So in our repository, user, we can do a void delete by, not there, sorry. Our developer controller, sorry, not developer repository, words. Developer repository, void delete by user ID. ID. The same concept. We can create the same things. Again, these are keywords that are recognizable. So delete by ID is already there. So delete by user ID, definitely recognizable by the system. So
That's
that,
so interesting to see because we never specifically talked about making a method or a field that was, well, we've done public void, but not just void and defining it.
again, part of that is because we are in a repository and which is a interface, and all interface, every method in an interface is considered public. So you have to have a public
Understood.
variation.
So it just falls under the hierarchy of how the interface works. And so everything underneath that automatically gains public, right? Because it's
Right.
resting against that.
Because the
Yep.
idea of an interface is the promise that anything that is a developer repository must have these methods that are available.
Understood.
I'm not finished
Gotcha.
that yet. Oh, yeah, I didn't finish yet. Get ID. Yep. There you go. And now our entire developer controller is now authentication safe. Our get all doesn't care who the logged in person is. So our get mapping here doesn't care who's logged in, just that you are, and then I can get all developers. Our get all languages, or get a specific language, actually, I think it is. Yeah. Or find all, oh yeah, get developers by a language ID, right? Find all developers by a language ID, same thing. Doesn't care who's logged in, just requires that they are, and then we'll give them all the developers by a certain language ID. Our get mapping by cohort, same thing. We'll find all of our developers by a cohort. Doesn't care who's logged in, just that you are. Anything here, likes, all these things. So any of these right here, since they don't pull the user, doesn't care who the user is, just cares that they are logged in because this whole mapping here, API developers, is an authenticated route or authenticated, yeah, so an authenticated route. So all the routes require you to be logged in, but not all the routes care who you are and do something based on who you are. That's the main thing to be aware of. The last thing I'm going to do is add one more thing that's a very common one you'll get. So where is our get? Oh, here it is. Get ID. So this one is getting a person that is not yourself technically. I also want to do a @get, not there. It's there. /self. And helps if I do double quotes. So this is a very common path or route. We're just going to paste in our current user system. Return repository dot get by user ID. Get ID.
delete user ID.
That, oh no, don't do that. Is it or else though? What was it again? Can't find my having a brain fart there. Or else though, yeah, or else. Oh.
That's
Oh,
not an
it's showing up.
optional. It's not optional.
Oh, I did delete. Oh, that's why. I thought you were just making a joke.
No.
I didn't realize I typed that. Fine. By user ID. Wait. Yeah, right there.
It's not part of a repository. Oh. All right.
Not sure why I wasn't importing correctly. That was weird. And now, yeah, last thing I'll say, yeah, our developer controller now is a very fleshed out kind of setup controller that has varying things that our users can do. It has the basic CRUD, and then it has a couple extra things that are probably front end specific that we decided that we want that extra capability, being able to pull a bunch of developers by a certain language ID. So I can, for example, within our front end, I want to be able to find other developers to collaborate with. I want to find all of the developers that know how to use the React framework. So I want to do a search on that, be like, hey, show me all developers that know React. So I can find people and say, hey, and try to collaborate with them. I want to know all developers that know Spring Security. Put that in there. So, and again, how we clarified that our languages weren't just languages. We also added that ability for it with Meta to do in frameworks too. So we did add that capability in our system. And so this is kind of what these items, you have your basic CRUD, get all, get one by ID, get self. That's what I'm looking for, itself. And oh, last thing I'll say, by the way, just to clarify. So this get by ID, usually what you'll do here in this one, a very common practice is you would have a response payload. And what you would do is you would then feed into the payload, you would have a build method on it. So you would build a, what's it called? How do I word it again? You probably would have a private developer object. So this would be a developer object that only sends down public data only. So you can even call it like a, what am I going to say? Pub dev. So you could call it a pub developer payroll, not payroll, pub developer class payload under here under the responses. And what we would do there is very similar to what we did in our, where is it? Here under security services, our user details implementation, this build item here. And so you would build a class that has only the items from the developer class would want. So an example, name and cohort only. We wouldn't include the email, for example, right? If this isn't your developer account, I don't want to give, let's say, yeah, I've signed up to this account and all of a sudden, you know, this stranger Emilio here is trying to look people up and he finds my profile and then he goes to look at my profile and he sees my email. Now he's just sending me emails left and right. I'm like, I don't know you. Sorry, Amelia. But yeah, that's the thing there. We may not want that down. I may want to not have that be public. And so I can create that response object. And what I can do is I can feed it a developer class. And then as you see here, we can go through and just return only those entities, those fields that we want. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the things too that you can do to secure data. You can build a separate response object or response payload that accepts a entity and then only though includes the fields that you want to include in the output. And that's another way to secure data. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that can get really, I will say this can get really fancy. You can build like something called a factory class. I can also check for if you have another entity that is like settings for the user settings on what fields they want to be public and not. You can also include that in your system. So there's a lot you can do to really adjust how the system works. So, but that is one way you can also make sure that you have fields in a owned entity that only the owner can see certain fields while everyone else sees less. So you use your payloads for that. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's all. So I think we have enough here. Again, the main thing with the last thing I'll show really, really quick is let's go to the Geek Out controller. Go ahead.
Just so making the payload and making these classes and the payloads are much quicker than say if I just decide just to use SQL queries and just grab the data out of the table, only what I want and have it displayed versus a payload?
Potentially, even then, actually, no, that, so. And that's other ways of doing it. The main thing that you gotta be careful of there is, do you get nulls then, which could hint to the recipient, if someone's sniffing it, that those fields exist.
Okay.
So that's the thing you gotta be careful of. By doing it, yes, use SQL query, you can then, yeah, only select certain fields, and so it'll only put the data in that object that it requires. The counter to that, like I said, is that you could, instead of getting blank keys, you get the keys still exist with a null. And so yeah, on the front end, the everyday user, never gonna know about it. But if you know you're one of those inspect source hackers who look at the network and see the response object, now you can see, hey, these fields exist. This is data that this company has. I'm
Okay.
gonna go try and get that. And now I have more tools that if I can somehow figure out how to get a SQL injection, or if I get access to your database, I have more ideas of what I can type in to try to get access and pull the data that I want.
And since the payload's an object, that's like totally invisible.
What's that? Well, yeah,
Since,
since
like,
it, yeah, the
object,
payload,
it's like an object, so it's kind of like you're getting the data, but you're not SQL, you're not using SQL queries for it.
right. And again, that's also for those who don't know SQL too well. That's the other variation to it. So that's the way you can do it without needing to deal with SQL. If you're comfortable with SQL, I probably would recommend that better, because yeah, you're not just spending any time, any Java processing time having to build a second object. So it definitely is a little more processing heavy to actually do that than to use SQL to just only pull from the database the data you want. But yeah, you need to know the SQL syntax for that to do so. What I will say though, again, to counter what my own little caveat is that you can, of course, add that. What was that? Where do we put that? Again, and again, this is just me being able to say this would be beneficial, because, and that's a problem, because remembering all the annotations is a pain. So where did we do that? I feel like one of these we did oh yeah, I actually think it was in the payloads. Not there, there. This one, here we go. If we do these, so ignore unknown, so anything that's null, if I remember correctly how this works, this one says, hey, if the field is null, ignore that property, do not include that property in the JSON. So as long as you include this technically on your entities, then your SQL query system will work as you want it to. It will not include those fields, and if they're null, it won't include them in the output to the user. So yes, that would be an alternative method of sending, let's say, again, a public profile versus a private profile. You could use the @JSON ignore properties and use a SQL query to do it as well. Sound good?
Mhm.
Cool. And again, there's multiple different ways to handle this exact thing. I've also mentioned that Jackson has something called views, which you can set up, and you can set certain fields to be part of a certain view. And then on the actual return process, you can actually apply a view to an entity and have it only send back the data for that view. So there's multiple different ways to handle this. I'm only giving you like one or two, so just be aware of that. And what's fun about that is discussing what you think is the overall best for performance and readability. I would say probably that the SQL version probably has the least amount of readability for Java developers. But if your team is full of Java SQL developers, then you're fine. So again, based on the company, based on the situation.
I was looking towards more security, like which would be more secure, using like the object
Neither.
core versus using like a SQL. Like you said, if you can see the SQL injection, you're seeing what you're pulling down
Yeah.
through SQL, then you can totally hack it all. But if it's an object, then it's like you have to. I mean, seems more secure because it's running as an application more than it is.
Yeah,
You know.
in that sense, as long as you configure both correctly, neither one's more secure.
Oh,
I
okay.
will say that the object one has less configuration requirements, because like I said, your SQL one, you need to make sure that this is there, that you're telling you to not send down the nullified keys. Make sure that those keys don't go down, and that you have your SQL set up right, that you don't accidentally include fields that you want to privatize. So those are the main things to keep in mind, that yeah, if somehow the SQL script you wrote it slightly off and it does pull the data, it's getting sent, period. Whereas in the object payload, The field doesn't even exist in that payload, so there's no chance for it to get added. If that makes sense.
Okay.
But yeah, if they are accurately created the same, if they're actually configured right, both the same, there's no better security item. Nope. That would be based on the developer. Cool. Last thing I'm going to show really, really quick is, again, just to make sure that we see it, we see one last item, is just seeing us bring in, again, the same exact feature on our Geek Out quick. So over here, I didn't do that on the other one, but it's fine. Service, user service. I'm not going to update all of these. I'm just going to update the post, just the post for this.
Don't forget the colon.
Thank you. Colin, go. Appreciate it, Jim. The same thing here. We have this geek out get developer get ID. The benefit here is that we no longer need to include the developer object in our request body. This doesn't change this. We still want the geek out content, but this, we're no longer having our users enter quote developer end quote open bracket ID number. So it's going to simplify our request route as well. That's one of the main benefits of this.
That just prints out the ID.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do that. So then paste in our fun code, the user current user, user service get user, make sure it's not null. All we're gonna do here is do, I don't know why we're still printing that though.
That's why I mentioned it. It was like it just
Oh,
prints
yeah.
out.
That one's just printing
Yeah.
because we need it. But what we're doing here now though, is we need to make sure we add to the geek out here, that ID number. So what we're gonna do here is do geek out. Oh, we need the developer ID, don't we? Yeah. So we still need to do, oh. This one does change a bit though, doesn't it? We have geek out approved user service. We don't have the developer ID, do we? And we need the developer ID.
Mhm.
So this is the point where you probably argue, maybe we need a developer service, but I want to save some time because we got to get over to React. So we're just going to bring in the developer repository. Accurate. I will say there's also the option of the user service, potentially even say, hey, the user service can pull developer profiles, but again, depends on, and again, that's all just convenience thing. How many different, where do you want to put this stuff? How often are you going to use it? Is it beneficial to create another service, add it to an existing service? Is that the only ever time you're ever going to use it? Are you only ever going to pull the developer in the sense of you have a user? So those are things you get to discuss and debate. So here though, we're just going to do developer. Repository dot get by user ID, current user dot get ID.
You're deleting the user by ID again.
Yep, I did it again. God dang it! Why is it
It's
preferring
funny
that one?
though, because it says delete user, but by ID, but it's still finding by user ID still, isn't it? It's still doing the
Technically,
same.
yeah. I'm not sure why it's defaulting to that. It's really aggravating me. Dot or else throw. Oop. Found. Wait. Yeah, I did the wrong arrow. Wrong arrow. Sorry. Once we have that, we simply do geek out dot set developer to current developer dot get. That's it. Just yeah. Never mind. Just current developer. We didn't do the optional. There we go. And that's the slight change we make there. So if you understand, so to make sure we clarify again exactly how that worked. What we did here is we did the request body geek out. So we no longer is this going to have a .developer record in there. So the body of this is just going to have the geek out data, which is title and content, right? That's all this is going to contain. We need to pull the user, because again, this is an authenticated route, so we know that there needs to be a user here for this route to work. With the user, we then pull the developer record. And from there, we then set the developer for that new geek out that we have. Once we have the developer in the new geek out, we can then save that new geek out. And we have our post. All good?
Mhm.
Cool. So yeah, now with this here, you should have the information you need to update the rest. And the other items are also, the other controllers will be very identical to this. So the only last thing I'd say is then the language controller you might want to do is under here, the post mapping. I'm going to add one quick thing here. And remove the syntax, let's pull up the controller. No, not that. There you are. We're going to say that a post mapping, so adding new languages to our system. I'm going to do pre-authorize as role. And we want the moderators to be able to add languages or just the admins? Moderators and admins add languages or just admins? What do we think?
I'd say just admins.
Yeah, just the admins.
There we go. And that's what this will do. So even though this is already a authenticated route, what we've done here is we've increased our authorization by saying, hey, also ensure that this authenticated user has the role of admin. So that it is authorized. So first authenticate them and then pre-auth and then also authorize that they are an admin only. Anyone else cannot access this. Sound good?
Mhm.
Those are the last things I want to show quick about our authentication system. I'm going to go, so most likely what I'll end up doing is maybe even during the breaks, I don't know how much time we have over tonight to tomorrow, I might update a couple more routes on the developer controller, sorry, the geek out controller, maybe even the likes as well, update a couple more routes so that our front end can utilize those systems. I don't think we're going to get to actually liking things in our front end till after the break. So don't worry about that. So it's not a big deal. The main thing that I'm hoping to be able to get done by tomorrow with the React system is really just logging in and signing up, logging in and posting one geek out is what I'm hoping to do with our system. All right. By tomorrow. That's really all I'm hoping to be able to get done. Any questions on this? That means good news. We no longer need to do any more Java Spring Boot stuff till after the break. This is the last bit of the Java Spring Boot stuff we need to do. Subtle, okay. Subtle. I didn't catch that.
That'll give us some time to catch up and digest all of this.
Exactly. And that's what I also really wanted to do, is give you guys tomorrow. So if you run into any questions tomorrow, you can ask about them. And you have the first part of the break. So on Thursdays, open hours, you can also come in and ask questions about the Java. But this will give you guys time to catch up. Now we're just going full React for the moment. Like I said, even the first couple of days back, we'll finish up a little more React as well. And then it's right into OpenShift. So we're pretty much done with Java Spring Boot. To be clear, to be kind of honest with it, we're pretty much done with Java Spring Boot. There might be a couple more things, minor things we do later to showcase the environment variables with OpenShift, but not much else we need to really dig deep on. So you have all the tools you need now to build Java Spring Boot programs, at least enough where you can then search for the other crazy ideas that your program comes up with. You have all the fundamentals. With this, you have everything you need to start building projects. And when you start coming across the more fanciful items you want to do, you at least know enough to search or to at least ask someone, hey, I'm trying to do this. Any advice, any tips? And so the same thing again, if you're trying to do something a little more fancy with your project, because what you think you're going to be, your users are going to want to be able to do with it, post it in Slack, ask me about it. We'll do it like on during the open office, the office hours and stuff like that. Ask the question so I can give you the advice of, and at minimum, what to search for. Give you some tips and tricks on ideas of how to search for that feature you're trying to do. All right. So that's it for this. Let's go ahead and.
I guess the only thing we
Keep it
would
running.
have to add here for ourselves, which is fine, would be in the language one, is be able to delete languages.
Yeah, that again. Oh yeah, let me go ahead and
Yeah.
add the language. Oh, yeah. here,
Oh,
so-
that's fine. I mean, it's just,
No.
we know that it's a pretty, probably a simple thing to do, but it was just, I just thought about that now and looking at it, I'm like, I don't have a delete thing. I mean, I have as many as I want, but I can't delete any. But,
Caveat. There it is. Caveat.
yeah.
One thing to keep in mind though, to delete a language, you would need to make sure that any users that currently are, any developers that are currently have that language listed, you remove those references. So you need to make sure that the Cascade system might handle that for you, but that is something you would want to look into. So just, that's why I'm saying it's a caveat. Something you need to look into to make sure, caveat, make sure I say things right. One thing you want to look into to make sure that when you do delete something like this, are you deleting it accurately and correctly? Same with our developers. I will say that the caveat that our developers, this delete mapping here can run into the issue that the geek outs can hold this hostage. So if you try to delete it, there's potential that if you have at least one geek out, the geek out system might tell you you can't delete this record until the geek outs are also deleted. So just be aware of those things. And we already know by personal recollection there that even the geek outs and the developers both are bound by the approved system. So definitely something that you would want to Google search on that is just how to delete relationship entities or things that are bounded by foreign keys. What kind of process did that go into? I do believe JPA has some features built in that'll help you with that. I think Cascade is part of that. But it's one of those things you want to look into before you start deleting things that aren't easy to delete. And again, that's part of the reason why you check on what's called soft deletion. That concept of soft deletion is a very key thing for companies because it does simplify the process and it can also allow them to delete during peak hours, but then actually delete from the system during off hours. So they can actually go through the system and delete. So that's the other big key thing there, deleting all the actual information that the users added to their site. So going in later to delete all the posts, all the user stuff, and then the record itself. So that's another benefit of soft deletion. For those who don't remember what soft deletion is, hard deletion is when you actually go ahead and remove it permanently from the database. You actually go to that row and it's gone. You highlight it and hit delete and it's gone. It's completely dead from the system. A soft deletion is when you have a column or a field that says active or deleted on it. And all you do as a soft deletion is just flip the switch from false, from being active true to active false, or from deleted false to deleted true, where your queries will now ignore that system, will now no longer pull that item, but technically the data is still there. This is very common for like a trash bin type system where you delete something, but the site will keep it for like 7 days in case you change your mind. So they'll keep it until either you undelete it or 7 days pass, and then the system, again, most likely during non-peak hours, will go and delete all soft deleted items. So those are other practices that companies do. Do you need to know how to do that? No, just know that it's something that is done. Again, these are key terms that I'm helping you guys to learn so you can throw these terms of art out there: soft delete, hard delete, off hour processing, things like that. Any other comments or questions?
I think so. And deleting, I was thinking about deleting. Yeah. No more questions.
All right. If you think of it later, you can always ask it in Slack.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like for coming into this, just looking through all of the Spring Boot content from YouTube and just following along with a fresh file. Following along here has been great. I've been picking up little things, but I think that'll be the best way for me personally. That's probably going to be some of my break.
What was that? Sorry. I think I
No,
missed the point.
More mumbling, just saying like, I'm probably going to, this is all great, but I'm probably going to start a file from scratch for Geeky Likes and follow along with the YouTube content.
It's something that I like to do. Yeah, I like to follow along. So that's why that's the main reason why I chose to do the recordings. So you guys have that so you can follow along when you have the ability to, and you can follow along multiple times. So
Absolutely.
I am definitely a follow along learner. That is my main way to learn, is I follow along and I must physically do something. in order to learn it. So
Mhm.
that is my learning capability. Some people are book people, some people are note people. I am a I must do. I'm a learn by doing type of person. So
I found an article deleting data in Springboot JPA and hybrid. It tells you how to like delete child tables like from the cascade remove and stuff.
so again,
I
that's something
posted-
you
I-
definitely
I
share.
posted
Yeah,
an
I'll say.
article in Slack for it.
Yep.
Posted
Yeah,
it
share that out with your classmates.
Yep.
All right, cool. I'm gonna do a 5-minute bathroom break, and we'll then after the 5-minute bathroom break, we'll start up React.
Very good.
Cool, cool.
Ooh. Hope everything comes out okay. Oh, Matt.
Hmm.
I wanted to send you this article, but I'll just tell you, look this one up. So apparently, scientists have taken brain cells and applied electrical to it, and the brain cells have developed and learned how to play Pong.
I saw that. I saw that.
That's pretty messed up.
It's interesting and terrifying.
Yes.
Probably because they'll be
Terminator, here I
better than
come.
me.
Terminator, here we come.
Yeah. Great.
You will be assimilated.
Screen. All right, back to
I
recording.
posted 2 new pictures for you just for some fun.
jeez. No one talk about them right now, though. I just started the recording again.
Okay,
So-
good.
Oh, jeez. Yep, we gotta really talk about that at the end of class. So what we're doing today again. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we had written before, what we had working. So back to my React app, npm start. Just confirm what we had running from Thursday. And then I totally forgot to actually put my React code up, so I'll try to make sure I set up a GitHub for this React code as well. So again, by the end of class on Thursday, we had a box in our center that has a nice hovering effect. As we click, we'll increase the box count by 1. What we want to do instead now, what we want to do differently is we want to add a button to the bottom of the screen. This is box 0, and as we click the box, click the button, we're going to add more boxes to our screen until we have a list of boxes, or a collection of boxes per se. And with that, we'll be able to showcase the concept of loading multiple entities. And then if time persists, what we'll probably try to do is talk about bringing in a tool known as Axios. And so some of you probably might have used like some, XML request or something like that, HTTP XML request for pulling data from an external resource. And remember how annoying that thing was to fill out and create.
Yeah.
So instead, we're going to be using a package known as Axios. Axios will simplify the concept of getting and pulling data from an external source, very similar to the REST template system that we use. It recognizes certain request types, so .post, .get, and it adjusts what you give it in order to better facilitate the system. We'll also discuss briefly about asynchronous code again to make sure that we understand that concept of making sure our site doesn't lock up while we're pulling data from the back end, and that it'll pull the data from the back end. As soon as it gets the data, it'll then update the site after it gets the data down. It doesn't lock the site down while it's getting that data. We don't want our site to freeze while pulling data from our server or sending data to our server. All right. But for now, let's go ahead and update our system to actually utilize the original box now. So again, I'm gonna use the original box. Right? No, we're not. So we still need to pass the number down. Right? Trying to think in my head. 1 second. I think we use the original border box. Yeah, because we have the counter that we can send a number to. So yeah, we can do that. It's fine. So we're gonna go back to the original border box because we're no longer gonna have a click function on it, like we're doing here. We're just gonna have it print out the text we want to see. So we're gonna also bring in a button. So what I want to do is bring in the next common code for you guys for the button that I have. So under common, file, button, S, import, React. In my normal button, I actually use something called Font Awesome for the loading spinner, for a spinner. That's something you can look into later, and I will be giving you one of the Font Awesome variations of it. So I have a button and an FA button. The FA button can only be used if you actually import the Font Awesome system to your project. So be aware of that. So if you're not going to bring Font Awesome in, if you don't want to figure out how to do that, if you have time, I'll try to cover it and explain how it works tomorrow when I go over my common components folder. So when I give you guys my common folder, I'll go over those so you can see how those work, and I'll even showcase how you use the Font Awesome package. So if you want to use the FA button, you can. Otherwise, you can just put the text loading or loading with 3 dots, and so you don't have to have an actual animation type of thing working in order to actually showcase loading. You can disable the button and just show the text loading. Button, props, or do the export default. Everything we need there. Do here is do return. And what this is, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a standard HTML button and just add some standardization to it. Some standardizing styling, because the buttons that we like to see nowadays are rounded corners and have like a certain feel to them. There's a certain feel to buttons nowadays that if you don't use them, they feel off. And to kind of show that quick, if I go here and do inspect, here, there, here. HTML and oop, that dang it. I should have added that. Why not? Oh, I didn't click away yet. Oh, there it goes. Does this look like a button you see on most sites?
No.
Not at all, right? It's tiny, it's bland, it's gray, the corners are kind of sharp. It's not a button that you're used to seeing nowadays.
Hello, 2006.
Exactly. And so I'm going to give you is a fairly common button styling that should help you guys with getting some good visuals. So what we're going to do here is simply do we're going to do this concept here, this styles down below. We're not going to use it right away. We'll just put here, do button here. What I want to do and show you guys a little trick here. So if you were to create your styles here, you're not going to get any sort of predictive text or IntelliSense for your CSS. If you want the IntelliSense, you have to do it in the style tag here. So what I like to do is put the styles here, but then I paste it here. And I'm going to show you here today, why do I separate them? Because I didn't show you guys that last time why I did this here. This didn't make sense to you guys before, why I moved it out here. I'm going to showcase today why we do that. First, button. Style. Go, ready. Align self. Center is the default behavior. Normally in anywhere, wherever it is, you usually want to be in the center of whatever container it is. That's what this does. Align self says to align myself in the center of wherever I am. So whatever my parent container is, I want to align myself in the center of that item. Or Let's see. What did I have here again?
You had like a blue.
Yeah, we have this one. What do I have? I have in my code. In my code, I have a color here. I don't know what color that is. I don't remember. It is a type of blue. Oh yeah, and that's a good blue.
Ah, so you can do a hash code for those. Nice.
Yeah. Hash code, RGBA, RGB. Yeah, all
Can you
those.
do HSB?
I
Hue
think
saturation.
I can't remember. I think if you can, I think it has to be like it might be a method looking style like RGBA does.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how it works in CSS, but yeah, if you can add it to CSS, you can add it here.
Gotcha.
Background color, left. Hue 5 is fairly common. Right. 5. Bottom, you do 10. Margin top. So some of you may be wondering why I just didn't do margin in general. Again, there's a reason for this that'll come up in a second. I will showcase it once I get to that point. 9 times out of 10 you want to do these. Width. Again, normally we want it to only take about 50% of its container, not the whole thing. We don't want it too wide in the situation that it can be. We want to take only about 50% of the width by default. And again, what I'm going to show again is that these are your default behaviors. We might use something different later. And I'm going to show you how to say, you know, I want this button to be the cancel button, so I don't want this blue, I want it red. I will show you how you can adjust specific points as you go. But go with the basics to start. That's one, border radius. This gives us our nice rounded corners that we're used to seeing on our buttons. And we got font size. A base should be 16. A nice good font size that you want to see is a 16. This is a static value, so be aware that if you want more dynamicism, you definitely want to switch this to either an EM or an REM, which we'll again talk about what that is later. I want to go too crazy into the mobile friendly stuff, but I will give you the hints where necessary. Top 5, bottom. Last two items, font weight is bold. And font family, you usually want to do a sans serif type font, unless you have another one included. So what you would probably do is in your application, you can always add the comma here and add your standardized format of font that you've chosen for your site. But a sans serif font is fairly common for buttons.
So as far as fonts, if you were to take some from a royalty-free site like DeFonts, for example, and you were to load it into your machine, how would that work with firing it through React or eventually through?
Just the same. You would just want to add that script to bring bring it in under the index.html. Where is that? Where did I put that again? In public, right? Yeah, in here. So you would add your header tags for bringing in those fonts in here under the index.html. Because this is a string, JavaScript won't validate the fonts, but that's how CSS works anyway. For example, I know that this is a font I've used in a previous site before. X02 is a font we've used. We have not brought this font into this project. What CSS will do is says, okay, let's see if is this font available on this computer? Well, first, is it available to me on the browser because of the headers? No. Does the computer have this? No. Okay, move on to the next.
Gotcha.
And sans serif is a generic type, and it will say just use the sans serif that either the browser or the computer has defined as the sans serif font to use for sans serif.
I really like that. That's very interesting.
It's a very smart CSS functionality.
Isn't it slightly always common practice just to, you could have all your fonts, but you always want a font that's always available, because if you don't, the whole system will actually crash. Or
you should always include a generic font type, either serif, sans serif, mono, Is it mono or mono type? I
Monotype?
can't remember what that. It's something mono.
So
Monospace. That's it. So here are the ones. Yeah, monospace, cursive, fantasy, sans. I don't recognize that one. Sans serif and serif. So most browsers or computers have a setting in the computer itself for sans serif, serif, monospace, and cursive. It's just the OS's default fonts for those. So all OSs have a default font for these guys here. So as long as you include one of these, serif, sans serif, monospace, or cursive, I know those will work. Don't know what fantasy does, and I'm not going to test today if you just don't have time. You guys can have fun with that if you want.
cool.
And I will tell you guys that a good, there's honestly just a really great source. Just Google Fonts is a great source for fonts. Google Font. They're all open source and usable. They give you the exact header format for it. And you can type in what you want right here to test what that font looks like. So
Yes, this is a very good source. Papyrus is one of my favorites.
Get out of here.
you can get stabbed. You can see the examples of what they look like. You can also search for certain types of them. So there's serif, sans serif, display, handling, monospace. You can put in the font type of name or type of things to really find. So what's great is that when you find one you like, let's say we'll take in our Rock 3D just for the fun of it. We can do either download family or we can add it to a package, which gives us our nice links right there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it tells
You
you
just
the
copy it,
CSS
yeah.
underneath it too.
What's that? Oh, yeah,
Underneath
the CSS rule too.
Tells you how to like bring those two
Yeah.
in or how to
Yep.
get those.
And they're recommending that if you use cursive, if Rock 3D doesn't fit, because Rock 3D is considered a cursive font. So they're saying that if Rock 3D doesn't load, you want to load the cursive font. You can of course replace this again with any of the other defaults, but that's what they're recommending because it's been tagged as a cursive font. So very, very useful site. I've used it before to find the ones I want, just to find some fun items. I've also used it to create logos for companies too. So you can have a nice logo like for a company. So
Yep.
they can be really useful to create a quick 5-minute logo as a placeholder till you get like an actual image. So there's a bunch of sources for this.
Logo testing in my college days when I was doing graphic design.
There you go. That's gonna be the fun part. Get that, and so that should be everything that we want. And last but not least, we simply want to do props. Edit. Children. There we go. And do that so it looks nice. So again, whatever we give to the system, we want to load that item. And that's gonna be it for now. I'm gonna add 2 more things just to showcase some ways of creating dynamicism in this button, but I want to start here just so you can see what this looks like. So we're going to save that. Let's go back to our app.js. Yeah, here we are. We're going to get rid of counter card and bring in border card again. Counter. Underneath the border card, we're going to bring in our button. Now we're going to do an A tag, a P tag. That is save that. So not exactly what we wanted. See the slight issue here? So one of the things that what is it? Flexbox will do by default is do side-to-side items. So it does what's called a row-based system. So one thing we're going to do quick here on our app here is what we want to do is we want to adjust this a little bit. So I'm going to bring it up for the flex items here and do flex direction. By default, flex direction is row. Put items left to right until it can't fit, then line return or wrap it to the next row or below. So it's going to put these things side by side until it can't fit, and then it will pop it down below. All right. We're going to change this to do column.
Oh, that's
Over. There we go. We still have a very, very big button because we're currently taking up the whole width of the page, and this is half of the screen. So remember how this is taking up all of this. So this is considered half. So it is taking up what we want. One last thing I'm gonna add quick is something called max width. It's a very common item to put in for websites because you want to make sure you don't go too wide. Next one is usually 720. Should fit most high def screens of 720 screen, but anything higher than that, we still keep to a fairly decent width. And we're no longer centered. Dang it. It should be. I don't know, we're centered. Because I did this on the app, I usually have a container class. Yeah, I'm gonna fix that. Hold on. Kill that. I tend to have something called a container. I'm going to share that with you guys later as a component I like to use a lot. Second, I'll put this bigger screen so you can see it better. I have in two spots. That's very confusing. This, and this here, and make that bigger. Nope, that didn't work right. I forgot to do width as well. Width of 100%. Take up as much space as it can, except with a max width of 720.
You just really just do a div class name container and just build a container.
I can, but I haven't done that yet. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
you do that later.
That always
Yeah.
seems to fix everything.
I
Mine
do have a
came out
container.
looking very different. I don't know why.
Where the border car counter and all that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I had it all commented out, so.
Take a second look at what I got. And then we can
Yeah,
also
these-
check the border card to make sure that looks correct, because I know we did some stuff with that recently. Like, I guess the question is, what's different about it?
Let's see. You just have a solid blue click me where I have, it looks like a button inside of the clickable style thing that we had, that this is box, whatever that we click on. It's a terrible description of it.
I want to see this.
It's a box in a box.
Yeah,
Sounds like
that's
it.
kind of what it boils down to. And I don't
Box in a
know.
box.
I don't know why it came out
What
like
the
that.
hell?
Oh, hell
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm very
Interesting.
confused.
I have the
He
same
gave
result.
himself another div
Oh.
probably.
Yeah, it's another div with the background on it. Yeah, right.
Yep.
That Mike.
Oh, let's
It's a second
a
div.
look.
That's what he was talking about when he said columns.
Hmm.
Those are columns. You have 2 columns currently.
so
That's why. Hold on. Check that stuff here for a second. The
Oh,
button-
go back to
no, you're
border
right.
card?
No, button good.
oh, sorry.
I thought
sorry.
you were in the button. Sorry.
Uh,
Turn button style good. Technically, style should be indented, but not important. And let's go ahead to what am I looking at? App.js.
Make sure those extensions are capitalized.
Correct. Back to the button again.
Yeah, I have the same layout.
That's
You
weird.
still have counter card in there as well. I know that. I saw that.
App, yeah.
I
Like
didn't
app?
know if you to go back to app. Yeah, you have counter
Oh,
card.
yeah. Line 25.
Yeah, that's
line 25.
that's this right here.
Yeah, but now we have the. I think he's saying that your
Because you
border
also
card, yeah, your
have
button's inside a border
card.
card. Yeah, sorry, no. Button is outside a border card,
Oh, it's
and
outside.
counter is inside a border card. Yes.
Oh, I have those backwards.
Yeah, that's why the button is inside of a border card. Your button is inside of a border card.
so I don't want this outer one then.
You do want that one. You just don't want
Oh.
button inside of it. You want counter inside of the border card. Button should be out. Should be below border card.
I thought that's what we were using
Nope,
counter
look at
card
mine.
for.
Hold on.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
we're no
please.
longer
I'm-
using counter card. Counter card's dead.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
got
counter card was
lost then.
a use case. Yeah. Yeah. Here we are.
Actually-
So border card, counter, border card, button, click me button.
Okay, border card.
And then I added this
counter,
div here just to make it look, nice, decent.
Okay. So we're not doing anything with counter card. Got it.
No,
One
counter card was a
moment.
temporary use case just to showcase the concept of clicking something and getting this instant response back with very little code.
Okay, now let's see what this does. That looks better.
Nice.
Although my box doesn't have a counter anymore. Was that supposed to happen?
You what?
Yes, I mean, oh, so I don't know. I don't think did we ever finish
look at mine.
fix border
Yeah.
card?
Let me see.
Yeah.
Oh, yep, that's fine.
Putting counter inside a border card didn't really.
Yeah, because counter just says this is a box, I think. Oh,
Yeah.
no, did we override our border card? Yeah, no, it's counter card. No, counter.
Because we made counter card
Sure.
to
Oh, yeah, counter.
do the
It
counter.
says, yeah, this is a box, props.count. Yeah, because we didn't give it any count, so we didn't
We
send it
didn't.
one
Yeah.
right now. So that's why we used to say this is a box. I can send it something, but I don't need to right now. I just wanted to get the basic visuals there, making sure it just gets to this point. And we can see that the click doesn't do anything though at the moment because we actually haven't configured anything for the click. But it does have the graphic where if you click on it, it does depress. It's hard to see on the white background, so you don't use bright white. But it does have a clickable animation to it because it is a button tag. So now let's discuss some more. So we need to discuss a little more on this. So a button is useless on itself unless it does something, right? A button's supposed to do something. And so there's more props that are built into things and including others. Button, for example, in almost every single thing you have, as you guys remember before, had that on click, right? If you remember the counter card, we had that on click system. That happens here too, but are we confident that every single button is going to do the exact same click procedure, or is every button going to be different?
Different.
And so what we can do is we can, again, use props for dynamicism, just like how all HTML tags have props. This button tag has the style property, the style prop. We're going to give this an on-click prop, but this on-click prop is just going to simply be props.onClick. Now, how are we going to get that to work? Well, let's go back to our app.js. I'm going to create a quick little function here called const handle click. That's a very common syntax to see. Handle as the handling an event. In this case, I'm just going to do an alert. This in Java script. This alert. Oh, so I think it's that. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Hello. I show a little pop-up window that just says hello. Alert, hello. And over here on the button now on line 28, we're going to give it that click on click attribute. Now, one thing I want to be very, very clear on this. Be very careful to do that. That looks like, it feels like that's what I want to do, right? I feel like I want to put that there, the parentheses, because this is the method. But that's not quite what I want to do. This is going to execute this and then send down to onClick whatever this returns. I want to send this method down, this function down as a usable item, as what it is. And so that's when I don't put the parentheses in. So always be very much aware of that. If you put the parentheses, that executes the function. A lack of parentheses sends that function. So that's one thing you want to be very, very careful of with this. It can happen and it will happen. If we want to actually have this execute it, we can do like this. Because on onClick, actually, one thing I want to clarify, onClick actually has a parameter we might want to include. So onClick has the event item. I don't know if you guys remember e.prevent default. That sound familiar at all from JavaScript?
No, I don't think so.
I remember we were using like a catch, like a try catcher or catch.
Kind of.
Yeah,
The
yes,
concept,
it does.
yeah. In this case, we're going to see it. We're going to see this a little more later on. When we get to forms, because if you put a button in a form, that button's default behavior is to submit. Well, what's the default behavior when you submit a form on the internet? Does anyone actually
Oh.
know?
Yeah.
What are the?
It reloads, right?
Yep, it reloads it as a post with all the form data in the URL. We don't want that though, right? And especially in our code, we don't need that. We're going to have JavaScript logic handle that system. And so the E has a system called prevent default, which does just that. It'll stop it from submitting the form the way it submits it and allows you to submit the way you want. And so it won't reload the page. And so all on-clicks have this event item, but let's say we only wanted to pull some data out of this, we could pull. So there's more behind this, this concept here. This says I can extract information from the on-click handler and send it to a handler I want by doing handle click E. And now this, because now what I did, I sent it a function, just a nameless function. That's what this is. This is again, very similar to Java, the Lambda expression that we saw. So we saw those in that or else throw. They used a single line dash. This is the hash arrow type. So you have the hash rocket, some people call it. So in this case, we don't need the E, so we're just going to do handle click, no parentheses. Again, we'll talk more about where those come into play when we get to the forms tomorrow. I hope we can get to
So
the forms tomorrow.
what is the difference between executing the code or sending it?
So yeah, if I execute it, what's going to get sent to the on-click prop is the results of this method, the return value. And so a handle click doesn't return anything. And so it's just going to alert immediately on the loads. I'm going to go ahead and make my site for you guys. So you can see right away,
I see what you're saying.
as soon as I load the page, and every time I do it now, every time I load the page, I'm going to instantly get this okay a couple times because it's going to re-render twice apparently. And then it loads the screen. I don't want that to happen. And then of course the clicking actually does nothing still because I executed the function and the function doesn't return a function to actually run. It returns undefined.
I think the better
By
way
doing
of
this, I'm now sending down a function that can be executed by onClick. This is me passing the function down to onClick to be used. So I'm going to send a reference to that function. So when onClick triggers, onClick will run this function. So now that I have that, if I click it,
It won't work.
I thought I saved. Oh wait, I didn't save my button code. So my on-clicker here isn't saved yet. Second, there we go. Now I click it, there it goes. Click it again, and I can keep doing it over and over and over again until I get bored, which depending on my age might take a while. And depending on how bored I currently am.
I go by my shoe size, keeps me young.
There you go. And
So,
9.
so just sending it in the app.js, sending it like this. This is basically just returning a void. This like running a void method, right? Versus the other way of actually, because you're actually returning something. You're returning an event. You're going to be expecting something data to return back. When you run the other way.
One thing to clarify is that all JavaScript functions return something. They all return. Just most JavaScript functions will return undefined. And you can see that whenever I do the inspect here, go to the console on the right here or somewhere here. Go away. If I do console, log, hello, bad. You see I get hello, but then I also get this right here. This arrow is the return, is a return arrow, and I get return undefined. So every single function in JavaScript always returns something. 99, well, I would probably say 80% of the time, though, it returns undefined. It's a function that doesn't return any sort of usable information. And so now when usually when you have those, you just don't handle the return. You don't do anything with it. You just drop it.
So you might talk about this when you do forms, and if you do, you could just say we'll talk about that after. But
exactly,
you said that the whole you can return a function. Is this where you would put in a validator? Like if we were putting in an email address, it has to have the @ sign and a .com in it.
Good. I will say for one of the benefits of yes and no. So one of the benefits that we have with HTML, what is it, 5 still, I think, or what the current browsers we have is that the form tags actually have a type field that you can give it for the input, and you can put type email. And so the form itself already has built-in validators for emails, phone numbers, and things like that. So there's some built-in validators that we can use. We don't need to, but if you were to add some, then I would actually, though, those would actually be added on the on submit, not on the button itself, not on the field. But yeah, on the handle, on the submit, when we handle the submit, we would pass the E through and we would actually handle it that way. But you're going to see how we handle forms in React, and it's a little very different than how we handle forms in normal CSS. We won't need to be accessing any of the actual fields in order to get the data, because we're going to have a state object that's going to be managing the fields for us. And so we're just going to handle pure JavaScript. We're not going to have to worry about trying to find a field in our system by ID number in order to update or get the value of the field. So it's going to be really, I think you're going to really like that when we get to that point. Let's keep moving as we get to that, because I want to get to that definitely. Yeah, forms would be very, very interesting. I feel they're a lot easier in React than they are in normal HTML. Anyway. Button on click me. So we now that we can click it and we actually have to do something. I think I want to do here. So what we're going to do here now is going to do, again, just kind of quick do what we did before. Const. Not that. I'll do. What's React? I am surprised that the import React is in here. That wouldn't make
You don't need React in app.js because you're not using any React stuff.
You're right. Now we're gonna use use state React. I'm gonna use that. You can also delete line 2, by the way, the import logo. We're not using that, so we don't need to import it. We keep getting that warning down here saying, hey, you brought it in but didn't use it. So also delete your name variable, so we're not using that. You can see that I'm warning right there.
How does the use state import come in again?
Curly brackets use state from React.
That's it.
Yep.
Okay.
I didn't mean to scroll down yet.
We don't need the logo. Okay.
State. Counter. Let's do that quick. So we brought in our use state again. We did again our const count set count equals use state 0. So again, default value of the count variable, and the set count is our function to update the count and change its value. We know again, it's const. We can't change these with the equal signs. The only way to change our count is through the set count method. If we save that quick, just take a look. We should see that this box is now 0. That's fine. All we do is to change our handle click to do set count.
I understand it, but it's slightly confused. It's just a slight, it's always a slight confusion in the brain because it's it's constant.
Yep.
So how can I set set count as constant? If it's a constant, then I can't change it.
Yep. And that's where again
it's just confusing, but I know it works.
Again, this is where it's a little confusing in the sense that I tried to explain earlier, where what you're doing though is you're overwriting the value and creating a new count every single time. So that's what actually happens under the hood. And that's why when we get later on, when we do objects, you'll see that a little better, is that we send it the object that we want to create, that we want. So update the object and send the object to set count, or to the setter, and that way we create a new instance of that same exact object, but it's a brand new, is a new copy of it.
Well, I know, but it's just like constant is like permanent. You're not supposed to be able to change it. So that's why it really bothers me. That
again, technically we're not replacing it. We're not changing it. We're replacing it technically, because this whole function gets rerun when you re-render.
But again,
so it creates a whole new instance.
Constant is supposed to be an unchanged. It's supposed to be unchanged. Supposed to make it and you can't change it.
Right, but again, that's why I'm saying, I'm making very clear though, the function gets rerun. So you get a new version of this function on the stack. So this is a new version account.
Oh, okay. All right.
You have app01 and then app02, and count app0 and app02 count and app01 count are different. That's what Java we're actually doing under the hood. And then, like I said, it affects the virtual DOM. App gets killed, the virtual DOM then gets pushed to the actual DOM based on the data there. So it's really fascinating how it works. It's crazy. Like I said, yeah, the idea that consts are changed. That's why, again, I explained that it's doing a lot of trickery and magic under the hood. It's all you need to understand.
To let and it would still work.
Yes, but I don't. I think so.
I mean, I know it's. I know you use
constant.
I know const is the.
I believe it does let you
do things.
Yes, Well, hold on. It'll let you, but that means you had that problem of accidentally changing
Oh.
count with the equal sign, and then it won't trigger a re-render.
Okay.
So if your state variables are ever changed without using the setter, your site will not update. It will not trigger a re-render. Setters and state trigger re-renders. That's the reason we
okay.
use them, because
Right.
changing state with the setters is how you trigger a re-render of the page. So if you're just changing variables freely, you're never going to see the updates on the page. You have to trigger a setter change in order to see the changes. Anyway,
Okay.
for this code here, make sure it's saved. We come back, and as we click, we see our box now increment. So we're almost there now. Now we have a clicker that makes a change to our system. So now let's go ahead and update this to be a collection of boxes that start with no boxes in the beginning. Then every time we click the button, we're going to add a new box with the count of how many clicks we clicked. So let's see how that works. To create that, we need something that will display a list of border card counter border cards. So that means we need this to be repetitive, right?
Mhm.
So the first thing we want to do is actually create our counter box. I'm going to call it. So under counter, we're going to do new file, counter box. Yes.
So what you're doing is every time you click the button, it's going to show a new box.
Exactly. And this is just our repetitive item. Since this is going to be reused, we want to have a component of this. We can just reuse this component multiple times instead of having to write it out. And all this is going to do is going to return our lines 26, 27, and 28 from the app.js. So copy that and paste that in. And count is going to be props. Count. Why is it angry? I didn't import them right. So I've gotten babied by IntelliJ now. Copy and pasting something auto imports a lot of times. So for a card, import. At least don't forget your export default. We got that. Sound good so far?
Do we need to import counter card as well?
No. Oh, wait, why didn't I do counter card? I want to do counter. All right.
You already have counter.
You already have counter.
How did I import counter card? We don't want counter card. I don't know where that came from.
That happened in a flash. I was like, wait, what?
I didn't see it happen. I have to check
It's that quick
check the tape. I didn't see how I realized I did that. All right, fun. I have to check the tape to see when I did that. Just to confirm, I did restart the recording, right? I did, yeah. I remember doing that. The lady spoke. I warned you guys. All good so far?
Mm-hmm.
Good. All right. Next up, we're going to do is I want to add one more item called our counter boxes. And so this is a very common thing you'll see. You'll see the singular, and then you'll have a plural version of it that is the list itself. All right. So it's a very common system you'll see. New file. Boxes. Box. Boxes. Props. Alt. All right. So now what we're going to do is going to have in our system, we're going to have a props equal to a number. pops equal number, pops dot count equals a number. What we do is we want to, based on the number, print out So I want to do that. And so we definitely need to, so in order to do something at X number of times, what do we need?
Counter.
A loop.
There it is, a loop, right? Whenever we want to do something a certain number of times, we want a loop. And so we're actually going to make a method that does this. I'm going to do a method called, I'm going to do const display boxes equals. And then we'll do output bracket. Let's do the bar or let a const. Here we go. Const output equals bracket. Then for let's equal here we go. Let equals 0. Count is less than props count. Count. Go ahead and do push. What's interesting here is we can push into this a JSX object. And so we're going to go ahead and push JSX into this array. I'm going to push in. I'm doing here. Do this right? Yeah. And this usually worked with objects before, so now I'm actually concerning myself. I actually haven't done it like this, but let's see. We'll see. Hold on. Do this. And counter box count equals count. Yep, that's happy. Good. And then return. So React output. React can print out an array of components as well. So just be aware of that, that React is capable of printing out an array of components. Once we have that.
I'm usually used to the map feature, but that's because I'm pushing data.
Yeah,
in, not using
exactly. We have an array of objects and map
Yeah.
creates another array. Yep.
Right.
So we're just mapping the array of objects to an array of JSX objects based on the objects. So, and again, we're going to get to that. Don't worry. When we get to the articles. But this is just me kind of showcasing that concept of programmatically building out multiple items.
No, this is cool. I didn't know you could do it this way.
Yeah, it can, but it's not common, but it's fine. It's a great way to introduce the concept. So return, not counter boxes. Hold on. Return div file. For the moment, I'm going to do display flex. Flex direction. We'll start with just column, just to start there, but then I'll show you the other variation in a second. Next, make sure we take up all the space. In here, all we're going to do is going to tell it to do display boxes, the function. So what we're going to do is run the function here and put whatever's in here, whatever is returned by display boxes. Display boxes will return either an empty array, which means it will display nothing, or it's going to return an array of counter boxes, which then will display one by one, one after the other. Last thing we need to do is come back to our app.js. Let's import our counter boxes and replace our lines 27 through 29 with counter boxes.
Could you go back to counter boxes for a second, please?
I can. A little side by side so everyone can see the app.js as well.
Okay.
I was going to stop here for a second anyway.
Well, what did we eliminate in our app.js? The border card?
Yep. 3 items above. Yeah, the border card, counter border card. Tags.
Thank you.
No worries. So we first go to our code, though we're not going to see anything, just to clarify.
Counter boxes.
Now, every time we click our box, it should. Oh, wait, I don't think I did that yet, did I? No, I didn't send it over yet. Sorry, counter boxes count equals. Got to send the count over. FJS counter boxes count. Got to send it that number. Why do I have 13 boxes already?
Oh,
Oh, because I clicked it and it refreshed the page. Right.
oh yes.
So every time I click now, we'll see pops in a box, pops in a box, pops in a box, pops in a box, pops in a box. Kind of cool, right?
Let me see the app just one more time real
Oh,
quickly.
yeah.
I think
Yeah, I'm not seeing that.
No worries.
Counter boxes.
counter boxes.
Equals, okay.
Oh, I don't need the border card anymore. Oops.
Oop, you're a border card. Yep. App.js should just be the counter boxes and the button.
There we go. Now I got it. I still had the error handling.
No worries.
Oh,
This was weird, but it's doing what it's supposed to do. So
there we go.
Nice.
Now I got it.
it's just like weird. Mine are popping up from like I have the click me button at the bottom, and then
Yeah,
the
I'm
buttons
gonna
are popping
move-
up to the
so-
top.
Same.
I am going to do something interesting here, though. We're going to move our button actually up to the top now. Oop, I'm hitting the wrong buttons. We'll move our button to the top of the screen. I'm also going to remove the align items from my div in my app.js. I don't want things being centered horizontally anymore. Sorry, vertically. I want them only centered horizontally now. So I'm going to remove that centering in the vertical side. So now everything should be up near the top once I refresh the page. Nope, of course not. I'm going to look like a liar. Right, reverse that, sorry. Align it and remove justify content. I forgot we're in flex direction now. So align items is horizontal and justify is vertical.
Wait, so you just got rid of justify contents?
Yep, justify contents I removed and it kept align items. That should bring that brings the button to the top. I also moved the button above the div in the counter boxes. So a nice long button on the top.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on, let me see.
So button is now above the div with the counter boxes. I probably could put that still in the div, actually. I'm not sure why I moved it above the div, but it's fine. We get a nice big button, or at least a nice long button. Wide, that's the word I'm looking for.
Oh, you know what? I don't have that div under the button. Whoops.
Not a big deal. You don't really need the div, but it's just making sure that things don't get too wide. Look at that. I want to just check this again. Oh, yeah, got it. Okay. All right, so now what you see, if you have my app.js button at the top, and as you click, it slowly adds them down one by one. And it also adds the scroll wheel automatically as we need enough of them. So I'm gonna click like a madman. There we go. Yeah, a whole bunch of boxes.
How
Not
did
bad,
you
right?
get the button to get to the top?
I moved it above the div and I removed align content, justify content from the style.
I did that too, and it's hanging on the side for some reason.
Flex direction column.
Flex direct. Let's see. Ah, no. Let's see.
Yep. Yeah, the column is what makes, so your flex direction decides what your dictates what align and justify do. So because flex defaults to column, align is horizontal and justify is, align is vertical and justify is horizontal. Once you switch your flex direction to column, your align becomes horizontal and your justify becomes vertical. So just be aware that when you switch your direction, you also switch your align and justify. That's where they get very dizzying on which one does which. So you have to connect them to your direction. That's why I usually say try them both out.
What the heck? Hold on.
Again, ready? You see, I currently have flex direction column, align, and my things are centered horizontally, right? They're centered horizontally, not vertically. As soon as I switch this to row, there, you can see here, there we go. it's hard, it's centered vertically now. So your flex direction dictates what your alignment does. If a line does vertically or horizontally, it's very, I don't like, that's one of the things I don't like about flex, but once you learn it, it's fine. That's why you just gotta play with align and justify to get the behavior you want.
I feel like I'm missing something here, and I don't see it.
What's
I have a massive error here.
An error, okay.
Yeah,
I'll have to
it's
check the error.
my div. It's my div. So I'm missing a div somewhere.
Oh. I need to head
Did
out,
we
okay.
did we ever take the style out of the initial part for button? Because you started to go in and talk
Not
about
yet.
why.
Yeah, we're gonna do that in a second.
didn't
I
know
did
if
forget
you
to do
were
that.
going
I did forget to actually touch base on that first, but I figured, we can do this quick. Now we can talk
Oh.
about that.
Hold on, I think I know I think I know what's wrong.
Because now we're gonna add I figured one of the fun things we can do is we can add a second button that says delete or remove. And that'll decrease the counter by 1, and we'll make that button red.
I fixed it.
Cool. So yeah, let's do this quick. I'm gonna do a quick little thing. I do div style
Oh,
flex direction. Row. Button. Use, say. Move. Dang it. So. So yeah, now what I did here is, I'm going to hide that for a second. Added a second button called remove that does handle reduce method, and I added the handle reduce method that just reduces the count by 1. All right. And I also added a div that puts the buttons side by side. And to see what my code looks like, and for some reason it didn't do it. Why? I think they're too wide. Let's find out. I'm curious. What are you doing? Oh, they're not inside of it. Why not? Well, that does it. Let's make sure your divs are actually correct. There we go. Nope. What the hell?
Oops, sorry. I keep doing that.
It's still doing that. This is something I feel like they did something recently where they changed the default behavior display from inherit to block. It's really, really aggravating me with a lot of these because this should just inherit the flex display, but it doesn't for some reason.
Mine is working.
Mine's working too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a browser thing. Mine, I need to clarify flex in order to get what I want. See, your browsers are being nicer to you. Why'd you do that?
the joys of CSS.
Oh, yeah.
Joys of CSS.
Yep.
That doesn't.
Ah,
There we go. That works. That's fine. They're really big buttons. And why? Wait, where's your padding? On the top and bottom. That is weird.
Yeah, my remove button is also skinnier than click.
Oh, because I didn't put a P in there.
Yeah, there's no inner text basically.
Right. The P tag hit by default because of browsers has default syntax or context. Yeah. It has its own default padding. So that. Welcome to the joys of HTML.
Oh, yes.
Hey, there we go. Now we kind of have what we want, but it's still, if you ask me, this doesn't look really great, right? It's not really user friendly. I have 2 blue buttons. What do they do, right? It might be nice if this one was maybe red, right? Maybe red with some white text maybe, or red, and just in general, just red text to show that this is reducing or cancel the negative and this is the positive variation. Just to confirm that it works, I'm going to click a couple times here and then click again. You'll see as we click things just pop in and out of existence now. Kind of nice, right? And you see how quick it is, right? How fluid it is. None of these seem to be like re-rendering. Like boxes 0 through 3 don't seem to be re-rendering as the other box at the bottom gets removed. The buttons I'm clicking don't seem to be changing at all or getting refreshed in any sort of way. It's one of those really great benefits that React does. It doesn't rewrite the things that already exist. It only adds in the things that need to exist. I did forget one thing, and I need to show this before I get in trouble later. Go to the console quick. All you should be having this warning right here that's in red. It's a red warning. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So you already know the term prop. When you have a collection of items here, currently what React is doing is it knows these things by reference, and that's not a good number to use. When it needs to delete something, it has to actually search to find the item it wants to remove. And it's very ineffective in larger, more complex systems. Here, it's not that bad because we're doing very simple items. We're just removing the end of the list and adding to the end of the list each time. But if we wanted to remove an item in the middle, React is going to have difficulty with that, and it's going to have to re-render a lot of things because it doesn't have any sort of identifier. And so what React wants with collections is a key. So under counter boxes, all we have to do here is in this counter box right here. This is the item that's getting repetitive, right? These are the items that are repeating and being printed out. We just want to do key and give it something unique. What do we have that's unique for each one of these?
The count variable?
Exactly. And most of your data you're going to get, that'll just be the ID number. 9 times out of 10. So we save that. If we then refresh the page and start adding stuff, you'll see we no longer get that warning. So just be aware that that is good practice in React to make sure you get keys to anything that is being printed out repetitively. Always going to get that annoying warning. Anyway, almost forgot about that. So now back to the buttons. Now that that's done. So I want to make this button red. Normally how I would do that is I'd probably just default to do style, do equal background color. I've got the double brackets. There we go. Color. Well, we like red. I'll just type in the word red. And normally that would work on a lot of systems, but ours isn't going to do that because our component isn't handling a style prop. If we load our button component, nowhere in our code are we referencing props.style, right? We can do that with these because these are built-in JSX items that already have a parallel tag in HTML. That's why these already have a style prop, because these were built by the developers of React and JSX, where they created JSX syntax. These items already exist. So what you do here is tell the system to use that, but I can only give the style a single object. So I cannot give style multiple objects. I need some way also to merge 2 objects. And this is going to give you another ES6 syntax. So I'm going to take this. I'm now going to cut it and put it inside this button styles I put down here, which I don't need the curly brackets. I have 2 curly brackets. Do that. And style, for now, I'll do styles.button. This is going to give me back the same behavior, but that still doesn't give me what I need. I need props.style. Unfortunately, I cannot do props.style, do a space or a comma. That doesn't work. That's not the syntax we're looking for. What we want to do is merge these two. Now, there are functions you can use, but there's also a nice ES6 syntax we can use, and it's called deconstruction again. It's the same concept. We'll put them in a new object. So we create a new object, and what we're going to do is tell it to deconstruct the items out of this object. Pull them out. We pull out all the keys. 3 dots? Yeah, 3 dots, sorry. I'm going to pull out all the attributes of this property, props.style. We'll stop for a second. And I'm also going to say do the same thing to this object, pull all the keys out. How this works though, because right now you're like, well, what if I have 2 of the same key? I now have 2 background colors, right? We know that styles.button has a background color and props.style has a background color. Any ideas what happens here? You want to take a guess, have a hypothesis what this might do?
I think it would be overwriting it because you set it on the one on the left on line 30 has been set, so it should overwrite the one on the right.
Kind of, I'll actually say I wrote these wrong. But yeah, what it does is it overwrites any existing keys the next iteration of a deconstruction. So this is going to bring in all the keys from props.style. So it brings in this object, it brings in all the keys and values from this object and sticks them in here. So this becomes background color of red. It then takes this one, deconstructs it, and brings in all the keys. And for any replicate keys, it overwrites it with the newer item. So probably want to say, hey, this should be the overwriter, right? This is the default behavior. And then anything that is sent in from above should take precedence, right? So let's swap these quick. Yeah. There, put that back in. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and see we get these properties come in first, and then these properties here will come in and overwrite any existing properties. So the background color will go from this color to red. And if I save this quick and go to my site, you'll see that happen.
So the button one more time.
Yep, I'm going to go back in a second anyway. No worry. And so this is the easy way JavaScript allows you to merge 2 objects together. You put the 2 objects in a new object and deconstruct both of them, and then just make sure you put the one that should take precedence to the right. So it kind of follows a CSS cascading style. The one at the end has the higher priority. And the more to the end you are, the higher your priority.
And we have red.
Yeah. Last thing I will say, this is the common syntax you will see for a lot of personal components. The default styling will be in its own little method, its own object that it gets constructed from. And then you use the props.style as the overrider. So this is a very common syntax in practice. The last thing I'll show on a button is just to showcase a loading system. In case we want to do, we're going to use that later. So I'm just going to put that code in now. And for this, we're going to use another prop and a ternary expression for this. So again, anyone remember what a ternary is? We have them in Java, so hopefully you guys remember.
It's basically a shortened version of if this, do this, and if that, do
Yeah.
that.
Exactly, because we said before, in these curly brackets, you can only have 1 line of code. Well, an if statement, an if else is more than 1 line of code, right? So if else doesn't really hit the format of a 1 line of code, but a ternary allows us to do an if statement in a single line. And so in this case, we can do, hey, if props disabled. So if our button is disabled, we're going to go ahead and say, oh, in that case, we want to showcase a p tag that says loading. Otherwise, No, that's not what I like. I like it like this. I don't. I'm trying to remember my syntax. There we go. That. There we go. That's how I like my ternary expressions. They look really cleaner. Like they look a little bit cleaner like that. So
What do the parentheses do?
it just wraps around the React component, kind of like what we have in with the return statement.
Oh.
The parentheses around here do absolutely nothing because you're just wrapping a method or a call to a property. So we called the property props.children. So these parentheses did nothing. It's just kind of a formatting preference that I like that keeps it similar
looks
to this.
nice.
Exactly. For me, it's syntax
Because
sugar
it's
and readability.
Symmetrical.
Symmetrical,
Formatting,
readability,
at least.
all that stuff. Yep. This can actually do that as well. And oh, hold on. This is how I like it. Right. Like that. There we go. This is how I do it. So that way on the curly bracket, you see your conditional first, then you get your first parenthesis, which is your if true statement. Then the second parenthesis is your if false statement. And last thing we'll do, everyone knows what the disabled, now, are you guys familiar with the disabled property or attribute for a button tag?
I don't think so.
All right, so I go to my click me button here and do inspect. And if I do on the button and do
It just
add
makes it
attribute
unclickable.
disabled, kind of, it does a little more than that. It also fades out the text. So it fades out the text and I can't click it anymore. We can do the same thing we're doing now with this by just doing, hey, on click. We can also add disabled to this and set it to props dot disabled.
0. Oh,
That means the parent system can disable the button by simply just doing disabled. I do that, now my button's disabled.
wouldn't
That's
you
what this
use
allows me
that
to.
if your so wouldn't you disable your delete button if there was none on this
Good.
if there was only one on there?
I like that idea.
So
Yeah, that
one
makes
is
sense,
equal
right?
To if your what is it called? Your props is equal to 0 is equal to 1, and you would delete it because you can't delete the single one that's there.
So in HTML, you can just do this. You can just put the tag on there, nothing else. But again, since this is JSX and Java, these are actually props that are variable types. So by just putting it, it gives the attribute of true. So by doing this alone, disabled equals true. But I can also do equals, open bracket, count greater than 0. No, count
1.
equal to 1. No, 0. I have none, so I can't delete anything. So if my count is equal to 0, triple. If my count is equal to 0, my button is disabled. There's nothing to delete. But if there's at least 1, I can delete 1.
So you can even
Right.
delete
That's a
the
good
first
example.
one that you make. I thought the first one would be your box 0 there. Can't use it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Right here, now click, remove, so I can delete it. But yeah, if I always want to have at least 1, I can set that differently, but
Why is your
In this
loading
case.
thing not showing up?
it is. loading.
Oh, fine.
It's just, it gets disabled. It's light colored.
Oh,
It fades away.
gotcha.
Yeah, we could add an alternative styling item to this to say also change the color as well, but we haven't done that. And that's getting a little more that I want to cover today. Good stuff. Okay, before we finish, what we're going to do to wrap up is we're just going to import the Axios item, and then we'll actually do the remainder. We might do that. It will actually pull the stuff tomorrow, so we can pull data, and then we'll see if we can get the form. So luckily, again, tomorrow is all React, so I'm going to dive right in. Let's go ahead and do this quick. Over here in the terminal, we're going to go ahead and kill our app and simply do npm I Axios, AXIOS.
Hold on.
Axios.
npm
Was it
Axios.
NPM?
Wait, you put an I in there, right? I?
Yep, npm I for install.
Okay.
And as long as you guys are using the modern version of npm, you don't have to do the -- save command anymore.
Do you have
It
to be in
defaults
the
now.
project in order to
Yes.
use it?
Yes,
Your
you have to be
project
in
has
the
to be
project.
running.
No. I killed the project with the control C, so the npm start is killed. So I
Okay.
killed npm start so I can install the package.
Cliff, could you just expand your terminal for a little bit? I can't see your command. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna do that and then do
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, oops, that wrong button. That, there we go. That's at the top. Yeah, bring this down a little more.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All good. I got you.
I hope so.
Okay, for a moment there, I got nervous because it didn't do anything at all.
NPM doesn't do anything for a bit. Yeah. Give it a second. It'll install it all. And there we go. What I'm just going to showcase quick is inside of just, I've got a counter, doesn't matter. So we have, if I do Axios dot, I have post, I have get, put, and I have delete. So I have all those methods I want. If I do get quick, you'll see get URL string config. And so one thing we do really, really quick here, this will be our last thing we do. I'm going to bring in a new hook called use effect. Use effect is a hook that is triggered on every re-render in certain situations with conditions. The default behavior, if you give it nothing to monitor, it's going to run on every single re-render of the component. So just be aware of that. But I'm going to show you how to prevent that so it could be a one-time runner or run only when certain components get updated. So all I want to do here is do use effect though. Again, go to my notes, 1 second. And it is a function. Yep, good. Right, so use effect. Use effect takes a function because that's what it's going to run. It's going to run that function on every re-render that is considered valid to run. So again, I'm going to add a conditional of when it should run. I'm going to do that now. It requires an array of monitoring things. Whatever, any variables you put in here are variables it is monitoring to say, if this item here changes, I should also rerun this. And so if I was to put count in here, anytime count changes, it's going to rerun this method during the re-render. So when the re-render occurs, it will also rerun this use effect. If it's empty, it's a run once item on load. It's called an on mount or on load for when this component gets mounted to the site. When it gets loaded to the site, it then runs this method once. I'm going to do quick is run our Axios on our URL localhost. Get, sorry. Turn over again. Localhost 8080 API slash, what was our news route again? Do you remember?
Thought it was in the test controller.
It is in the test, so it should be API test. Test what? News, I think it was.
This controller, you have it on the right now.
Oh, I do. Yep. API test news, and I have to give it some sort of query, so which is fine.
Yeah, which is just like it was the business or whatever. So you're looking at
slash React. We'll do a search on React items. What we do here is we're going to do something called, I'm going to do, so again, when I write a little code, don't worry about the understanding this code yet. I just realized, but we'll explain it more on tomorrow.
Asynchronous.
You're just writing a little validator.
You kind of I'll do it this way instead. You guys are coding on, cool. If not, don't worry about it. This stuff like I'm going to go over again on Monday. Okay, save it and. I didn't know it was running right. I have to do npm start. There you go.
That usually helps.
Tends to. Load. Don't see what I expected. Oh, right, I'm done. So what I did here is I created an asynchronous method because you can't do async on the use effect on this guy right here. Use effect is not asynchronous and it cannot accept an asynchronous method, but I can define one in here. And then I can tell use effect to run an asynchronous method doing get use. And so that will run an asynchronous method. All you know is an asynchronous method. When an asynchronous method sees the word await, this code right here is going to stop and wait right here for this code to finish, even though this code is considered a asynchronous code that the normal JavaScript execution is to continue along the line. And so normally when you run into this axios.get, this console.log will run printing out the undefined of response or the emptiness of response before axios.get finishes. Since it takes time to go out to a website, tell that website, hey, I need data for that website to give you data back. This is telling this line of code to hold because the method is asynchronous, everything else down here will still run. So it's not going to lock everything else out. So this method will run in conjunction with all the other code down here. This code is not going to stop all this. While this code can sit here on this line 15 and wait, again, everything outside the method will still run. Everything outside the function will still run. Basic gist of what this is doing. Once this actually gets the data, though, it's going to give it to response and then run the code below it in order. So that's the basic gist of what's happening. Again, we'll touch more on it tomorrow. Now, if I go back to my
You gotta save it.
here. Oh, thank you. Save. There it goes. This,
Your counter's
we shall
not saved
see.
either, but I
I
don't
got told I got a React error. So I didn't get the data. Is my IntelliJ running?
No.
It says it is, though.
It is.
No, it's not, 'cause it crashed.
Oh, nice.
Authorized full authentication.
Let me make sure it's running. Hold on. I want to make sure it's running. I just want to make sure. And I'm going to test that route first. So let me go ahead and grab that route again. Make sure that the route is correct. And if not, I will fix it. That was probably it. Axios is not a browser. It will not fill that in. But let's see. This works. It does. Good. So now it should be happy. If I just do a save now. Here. There it is. Take a look at that.
There you go.
All right. And so what we're going to do next on Tuesday, tomorrow, is we're actually going to be able to use this data. We're going to put this data inside of a state variable. And what we'll do is we'll have our counter boxes be updated to, instead of being a counter box, we're going to create an article box. So we get an article and then an articles component. And we're going to use state and use effect in order to showcase a loading text. It won't be fancy animated. We're going to use a loading text to say loading or fetching, if you want to, you can say that. And as soon as the data is collected, it's then going to load a bunch of boxes showcasing all of our components. The last little quick thing I want to show before we go is back over to our app.js here. For our counter boxes, actually, or here, sorry. I'm going to change my counter boxes display from column to row. So I want them side by side. Now, normally on a system, this is going to cause it to squish. And the default behavior is to do that. We don't want that though, right? I want this to wrap. I want these to keep printing, but once I run out of room, I want them to go on to the next line, right? And so I have something called let's wrap. Wrap. Now my box is wrapped. What I'm going to do quick, because I'm dumb, is going to remove my app.js, that max width. I'm going to set that to nothing for the moment. Get rid of that. a little better. And there we go. When it cannot fit a box, it's going to go ahead and just go automatically to the next line. And as I resize my page, it will auto adjust automatically. Mobile friendliness built into the system.
God, I had to use jQuery for that so long
Uh-huh.
ago.
Media
Now it
tags,
just does it.
jQuery, media tags.
It's like mobile with, yeah, God.
Mobile first, and that's why I wanted to introduce Flexbox to you guys, because this is how I have been able to make mobile apps before, and how my sites can be mobile friendly. I use Flexbox for that because of these features right here. Again, can it be a pain in the ass? Is it a good amount of trial ever? 100%. But I can say with 100% confidence, this is so much easier than having to deal with app media queries and CSS and having to deal with jQuery and testing and doing all sorts of conditionals and stuff to handle it. So way easier. Be happy that you have Flexbox at your command now. But yeah.
What did you do in the because mine is still going down in the other than adding flex wrap to your counter boxes, what else did you do in the app?
I removed the max width. I removed the max width for counter boxes
Counter boxes, all right.
in
max
app.js.
width.
So line 53 for me.
Yes.
So the div that's contained the container box, the counter boxes no longer has a max
Yeah,
width.
that was it. Okay.
There you go.
There
So
we
those are
go.
some of the nice features you have in React when you combine React with Flexbox. I do feel that Flexbox and React were kind of made for each other. So again, hopefully tomorrow I will have the rest of my common components ready to go. So you'll have a bunch of components that are usable for you guys. You can look through those for reference, learn about other ways that you can create things and import things. I'll create a FA common. Those will be common components that include the Font Awesome package. So you only bring that folder in if you're going to use Font Awesome. If we have time to cover it, I will. If not, maybe I'll make a mini video on it or something, but we'll see what we can get to. The main thing I want to touch base though on tomorrow is loading data from external systems so we can display multiple components. We can display those items after we collect, so we can fetch and then display what we fetch. And last but not least is to build a form where we can register a user and log that user in and then get all developers. We probably won't have time to actually post an actual geek out maybe, or actually, yeah, we might not have time for that, but we're going to try. We'll see how we do. All right.
Can you please push the changes you did to your
First
geek lights?
IntelliJ. Yeah. Do that first.
That I wasn't coding along, so I'll just pull them.
Oh. A. MP 1.0 done. Cool. That. We'll go here to this. Kill this. Okay. Get is already there because of create React app. Did display.
Like, and your code is mine, like magic.
Sounds semi, what is it? That made me flash back to freaking Mortal Kombat for a second there.
Your code is mine.
Exactly.
Get over here.
So, React demo.
Oh God.
That good. Grab these. This. And now we get that. So yeah, ch12 React demo under my GitHub. So. Oh, that's Slack. That's the picture. There, good. And that's now in the Slack for everybody. Stop sharing now. Good. All right. So, like I said, I know we're covering a lot in a very short amount of time, so I don't expect you guys to be impressive with React. The goal is that you can start fiddling with it during the break, because you guys have already had a good amount of time working on your projects. I'm hoping that definitely during the back end, during the break, you can have a lot of your back end done. And this at least gives you something you can start fiddling with and start prepping some pieces, at least maybe building some pieces to it and starting with some stuff. Like I said, tomorrow I do plan to give you a good number of components, including a nav bar. Oh, I still need to cover React Router. Actually, no, that's tomorrow too, right? Because we have to do that for the login page. So we'll also talk about routes, and all that tomorrow. So tomorrow's going to be a day full of React. We should be able to fit as much as we need in order to get you guys to a starting point. If not, we will put React on pause for the break, and we'll cover it again when we come back. We'll see what we can do though. All right. Cool. Homework, just keep playing with React, update your Expressian apps to utilize what we did today. So update your routes on Expressian, and in your personal app, start utilizing the authentication systems. So wherever you see us, especially in your Expressian app, if you decide to do customers, everywhere you see you're pulling the customer ID from the body or from the route, change it to use the authentication. If you're using it for the employees only, anywhere you see you're pulling the employee IDs through your route or body, change the authentication. If you have it using both, make sure you're pulling the right one, and then also make sure to pre-authorize those routes for the correct user accounts, the user roles. So add those pre-authorized systems, make sure that a employee route can only be accessed by employees and admins, whereas customer routes can only be accessed by end customers. Sound good? Cool. Those are things you want to mess around with. Mainly just get that practice so that when you start working with your personal project, it is easier for you. All right. Like I said, on Thursday, again, tomorrow we have class, but Thursday I will hold some office hours for you guys. Like I said, around probably 6 o'clock I'll do it. But I'll keep you guys posted on when that starts. Any questions for tonight? Awesome. Keep hacking at it. We'll get through this. We'll do it. It's good stuff. Keep it up.
Hey Cliff, I wanted to talk to you.
Sure. Who was that? David popped in. That doesn't seem like David's voice. Okay, good. I was gonna say that was not David's voice, but David's name thing popped up. I was like,
Oh, that was not me.
No, it was not. I was like, why is David's popping up? That is not
I
David.
was getting confused.
I was confused. Like, that's not David. I'm pretty sure
Was that Freddie who just?
Still recording, by the way. Still
Yeah,
recording.
Yep.